Part 77. Infinite Script Killing. Author, Guo Shui Xiao. Chapter 791. The environment on the third floor is obviously quieter than that on the second floor. Leaving aside Zhou Mu and others who had just gone upstairs, there were only a few people there. Su Tong looked at the past, 3 old men, an old woman, and a thin-faced man. We can't tell what their strength is, but looking at their clothes, we can tell that the 4 of them are either rich or noble in the underworld. Grandma Meng. Sure enough, after Zhou Mu and others went upstairs, they ran towards the richly dressed old woman. As soon as he opened his mouth, Su Tong was shocked. Zhou Mu, a group of devils in the world, actually wanted to ask this woman to call her grandma. One can imagine this person's status in the underworld. Grandma Meng, why are you here? Zhou Mu and the 5 people gathered around her, their mouths were as sweet as honey, one mouthful at a time. The friendly way they called her, and the cute smile on her little face were completely different from the one they had just downstairs. Su Tong's guess was good. Zhou Mu and others came up with displeasure. Seeing these 4 old men with their cute appearance, Su Tong had to admit that he was willing to call them the best in terms of acting skills of pretending to be grandsons. It's just who is this old lady that can make these 5 devils be so well behaved? I just heard them call her Grandma Meng. Could it be Pu Meng? Su Tong secretly speculated in his heart, and immediately turned his eyes to the treasures in front of him. What was unexpected was that the exhibits on the 3rd floor turned out to be a neat row of coffins. Are blind boxes so outrageous now? Well, this is very netherworld. Be careful, there's something wrong with these coffins. Lilith's hand gently held Su Tong's arm and whispered. Not only are there problems, they are simply blind boxes. Su Tong borrowed his life and looked at Kimin, only to see these coffins in front of him, each one making people feel more uncomfortable. Among them was a coffin, covered with various strange barnacles, as if it had been salvaged from the sea. Minji and Kimin looked around and saw that the coffin was tightly wrapped in a hazy aura. This hazy and ominous aura made people think of only death and decay. And the coffin on the left made Su Tong even more wary. This coffin was from an unknown age. It was not made of wood, but a coffin carved from stone. Strange graphics are carved around the coffin. On the coffin board, there are 3 distorted faces, which look like smiling but not smiling, crying but not crying, and angry but not angry. The eyeballs on every face, no matter which angle you look at them, make you feel as if they are staring at you, which makes your skin crawl all over. The other coffins were also not simple. Su Tong looked at them, and the more he looked at them, the more worried he became. There were 3 coffins behind them, wrapped in black cloth, so it was difficult to see what was going on. Such a weird product would make anyone murmur in their hearts, but they also inevitably have some expectations, wanting to see what is in the coffin. Grandma Meng, what do I think? Not just these broken coffins, they are worthy of your labor and effort to come here in person today. If you like, I will carry these coffins back for you. Zhou Mu and others were very enthusiastic towards the old woman. They squatted beside her seat, either squeezing her shoulders or beating her legs. But he didn't even look at the coffins behind him, as if pleasing the old lady in front of him was more important than anything else. The old woman who seemed to be Mengpo raised her hand with a smile and stroked the heads of Zhou Mu and the children with her slender nails. Don't underestimate these coffins, they are all salvaged from the underworld. There are not only some dead gods who disobey the destiny of heaven, but also way treasures that have long since disappeared between heaven and earth. God of death. Hearing these 2 words, Zhou Mu's faces suddenly became alert. In Hades, the place where death returns, the god of death is not a good word. Their fathers had told them how terrifying these dead gods were, and it was rumored that they were once powerful gods. Like the dragon in mythology, it remains unknown for a long time. In other words, they are more like gods from before the ancient times. It's just that every era must come to an end. Just like Master Shuigui, who inherited the destiny, wiped out all the 9 sects, and risked the eternal sin to keep them in Bamang. Under the will of the times, these gods knew that they could not resist, so they used special methods to bury themselves in the netherworld, the human world, the heaven, and even the more distant past and future, waiting for the moment of resurrection to overthrow the rule of the gods. Therefore, in the underworld, the god of death is a taboo word. Now that it is mentioned by the old woman, it will inevitably make Jomu and the others nervous. Don't worry, not all death gods can survive. The probability is so low that it's almost impossible. An old man sat on a chair, sipped a sip of fragrant tea, and said with a smile. The old man didn't know his identity, but being able to sit so close to this old woman who seemed to be MRS men was obviously not a good thing. Then what are you waiting for? Just take it apart and see what's inside. Jomu looked at the coffin and couldn't suppress the curiosity in his heart. But as soon as he said these words, the old woman laughed dumbly. He, this is not something you can fool around with. Maybe there will be no death in the coffin, god, but the coffin must also be cursed by the dead god. If you want to open the coffin, you also need to have the courage to gamble. Curse? Is it very powerful? Ghost Emperor Jochi once opened a coffin and lost a finger. What do you think? Scare. Everyone was shocked when they heard this. Jochi, as the central ghost emperor, sits in Bayadu Mountain. He even lost a finger, so one can imagine the danger of this coffin. Su Tong and Lilith were sitting nearby. When they heard this, they couldn't help but secretly sighed. I didn't expect that this kind of thing would be sold at this Chamber of Commerce. After a while, several more people came upstairs one after another. These people are obviously wealthy businessmen and wealthy families invited by King Linghuo, and the families behind them all have some status in the underworld. After seeing these coffins, these wealthy businessmen all widened their eyes. These are rare treasures. If it can be opened, the ancient gods' weapons or even treasures may be found inside. You are late, you are late. King Linghuo also hurried over at this time. As the organizer of this Chamber of Commerce exhibition, King Linghuo's honest catfish head even wore a hat today to show his importance. It just feels funny no matter how you look at it. After all, can you imagine catfish wearing a hat and saying hello to everyone? Su Tong always felt that this guy seemed to be saying, hello everyone, I will show you a unique skill today, chopping my head off. King Linghuo came and introduced to everyone, these coffins are all salvaged from the depths of the underworld. They may contain the treasures of the dead gods, or they may only have a few bones. It depends on what you can get. How's your luck? As he spoke, he walked up to the first coffin, patted the coffin, and introduced it matter-of-factly. When this coffin was salvaged, 2 ghost kings died on our side before we could barely suppress it. There must be something inside. For large items, we start with 2 regular banknotes and 3 private banknotes. If you miss the opportunity, there will be no such store. The Spirit Fire King took out a small hammer, danced with his ridiculous little claws, and started bidding. 5 private notes. A businessman hesitated and decided to take action. 5 shiny banknotes were placed on the table. There was almost no difference between this banknote and the banknote in Su Tong's hand. The only difference was that there was no Great Emperor's seal stamped on it. Although this kind of private money is also effective in the underworld, the value must be discounted. 7 pictures. Soon a businessman increased the price. After all, the words treasure of the dead god still have great appeal. 8 pictures. Some people continue to pursue the price. Su Tong was not in a hurry, he also wanted to see what was inside the coffin. And he didn't think much of the coffin. Minji and Kimin looked around and saw that the coffin was wrapped in a strong rotten air, and there seemed to be a faint, disgusting red light inside. Finally, when the price soared to 12 pieces, no one stopped raising the price. A chubby wealthy businessman came out and looked at the coffin in front of him, but he didn't dare to open it with his own hands. Inside the coffin of the god of death is not only the treasure of the god of death, but also the curse of the god of death. So he summoned two ghosts and asked them to open the coffin on his behalf. The god of death has opened his coffin. Please exit beyond the red line. Otherwise, if something goes wrong, our store will not be responsible. The spiritual Fire King reminded everyone to stand outside the red line, and then pulled the mechanism. A golden formation rose from the red line, completely isolating the space inside from the outside world. Everyone could only see the two people inside holding crowbars, forcibly pry open the coffin. Kaka. The harsh sound of opening the coffin made everyone frown. As the coffin was slowly opened a gap, everyone could not help but widen their eyes. Buzz. The lid of the coffin was lifted, and a rotten smell came out, and inside the coffin was a rotten corpse. What is strange is that there is a short sword stuck in the chest of the corpse. The treasure of the dead god. Everyone's breath quickened when they saw the dagger. The dagger seemed to be made of bronze, and the blade still shone with a dazzling cold light under the light. Strange textures appeared on the sword body. The textures looked like talismans but not talismans. They were strangely curved and revealed an evil murderous aura. Yanshu. Su Tong became nervous when he saw the strange texture on the sword, thinking that the texture looked like a Yanshu technique. Immediately I took a look at Kimin with my life eye, and I felt that the blood was dazzling, accompanied by great danger. But when the businessman just saw this, he didn't care anymore. He jumped into the formation and reached out to grab the dagger. The treasures left by the dead gods are all rare treasures in the world. With just a short sword, he had already made 10 times the profit from the 10 pieces of money he had just paid. Buzz. Without using any force, the dagger was snatched up by the wealthy businessman. Looking at the shining sword in his hand, the wealthy businessman was so excited that he wanted to scream. While holding the sword in his arms, he looked back at the coffin to see if there were any other treasures inside. He glanced around and saw a jade hanging on the chest of the corpse. He immediately stretched out his hand to pick it off with gleaming eyes. Hey, this guy is really lucky. Seeing the wealthy businessman lying next to the coffin and starting to plunder the corpse, everyone couldn't help but curse secretly, and inevitably felt a little regretful. If they had known that there was really a big deal in this place, they would have made a big bet just now. It's a pity that there is no medicine for regret in this world. Everyone can only watch the wealthy businessman make a fortune this time and curse a few times in their hearts. Woo-oh. Suddenly, the rich businessman's body shook violently, and everyone was shocked when they saw thick black mist pouring out of the coffin. Ah! The two ghosts who had just pried open the coffin wanted to run away when they saw this, but when they touched the golden light, they were bounced back by the formation. It turns out that this formation can only be entered, not exited. I saw the black mist surging, and a skinny palm grabbed the rich businessman's body and dragged him directly into the coffin. Soon, I heard a shrill scream coming from the coffin. There will be another update tonight. Infinite Script Killing. Author, Guo Shui Gan Xiao. Chapter 792. It's the God of Death. Seeing this scene, some wealthy businessmen's faces turned green. The name of the God of Death is not just blown away. A long time ago, 7 dead gods were resurrected, and none of the 5 ghost emperors could hold them back. Fortunately, Fujun and Emperor Fengdu took action in the end, killing 2 of them, but the remaining 5 dead gods escaped with serious injuries. The Yin Cao. There has been no news since then. You can imagine how terrifying the God of Death is, even Fujun and Emperor Fengdu have to personally suppress it. Boom, boom, boom. At this time, lightning suddenly flashed in the formation, and dense thunder and lightning fell. The next moment, the black mist in front of them was completely shattered. Through the lightning, Su Tong saw a figure sitting up in the coffin. The blurry body could not tell whether it was a man or a woman. His hands were struggling painfully in the thunder and lightning, and he made a low roar. However, everything was in vain, and soon it was wiped out in the lightning and disappeared without a trace. Along with him were the wealthy businessman and two ghosts who pried open the coffin. When the lightning was extinguished, the coffin was already empty. Only the dagger, which was shining with fierce light, still shone with a cold light in the free electric light. Ahem! A slight cough made everyone recover, and they saw King Linghuo walking into the formation and reaching out to pick up the dagger. Don't worry, everyone, when the death gods first revived, they were so weak that an ordinary person in the Yang world could kill them. This 5-Do heavenly thunder formation is the strongest thunder formation in the world. Even the death gods will be wiped out. After saying this, King Linghuo waved his hand to summon the attendant, who came up with a plate. King Linghuo put the dagger on the plate. As for this dagger, there is already a buyer. Even if the buyer encounters misfortune, I will send this thing home and return it to the other person's family. We who do business, integrity is the lifeblood, and we will never keep it private. Greedy for treasures. King Linghuo said it lightly, but anyone with a discerning eye can see that this is to avoid the important and take the easy. If the co-author reveals the god of death, the person who opens the coffin will also be buried with him. This blind box is not easy to open at all, at least you cannot open it yourself. This is not gambling, this is clearly risking your life. For a moment, everyone began to hesitate. Upon seeing this, King Linghuo quickly signaled to his attendants and walked around in front of everyone with his dagger in hand. The attendant walked very slowly, as if he had carefully considered each step, pausing for a moment in front of everyone to let everyone look more carefully. When the dagger stopped in front of Su Tong and Lilith, the fierce murderous aura was still frightening. There was no doubt that this was definitely a fierce weapon. Su Tong even felt that the power of this sword might not be inferior to the pair of black water dragon teeth daggers in his hand. No, it might even be able to compete with his own pure yang sword. The attendant walked up to Mrs. Meng, and Zhou Mu and others immediately surrounded her. No man is willing to miss this kind of peerless magic weapon easily. Zhou Mu ignored the rules here and directly reached out to pick up the dagger in the plate and tried to swing it a few times. The blade of the sword made a ripping sound, cutting a hair-like crack in the air that would not heal for a long time. It is indeed a magical weapon. When Zhou Mu saw this, he looked overjoyed, thinking that if Yu Shangxia had held this sword, he would have killed that bastard named Su long ago. Thinking of this, Zhou Mu looked at the dagger in his hand and refused to put it down for a long time. Seeing this, the attendants on the side couldn't help but feel a little embarrassed on their faces. They opened their mouths and didn't know what to say. Master Zhou, this sword already has an owner. If the master likes it, we must not miss the opportunity to get the coffin next. The spiritual Fire King said with a smile. This was originally a tactful reminder, but he didn't want to make Zhou Mu's face change drastically. He pointed the sword in his hand at the spiritual Fire King and cursed. Go away, who do you think you are? People who respect you as Shentu will give you 3 points of thin noodles. You really think of yourself as a person. I am playing with you, but you still take it seriously. Believe it or not, I took your head make fish head soup. The scene suddenly became cold. The small eyes of the Spirit Fire King blinked, and the 2 fish eyes almost became round. The slender fish whiskers trembled wildly and emitted sparks. Everyone looked embarrassed, and for a moment they couldn't persuade him or say anything. After all, they couldn't afford to offend Zhou Mu, a devilish figure with a vicious reputation. However, some people sneered at this, thinking that Zhou Mu might be in trouble today. This is Dokeng, not Fengdu. Behind is Dozai Mountain, the base camp of the 2 great emperors Shentu and Yulei. It's okay for you to do evil things on weekdays, but if you really make trouble here, I'm afraid the two great emperors Shentu and Yulei will not let them off lightly. At that time, I am afraid that Fengdudo will not be able to protect them. Even if they take their lives for the sake of being Fengdu 6 days, there will definitely be no good fruit to eat. Everyone thought that Zhou was usually too arrogant and went too far today. But on the side, Su Tong used the life ikumen to see strands of red thread seeping out of the dagger and spreading along Zhou's arm. It was like there was a red thread controlling Zhou's arm. Mood. Such a domineering and evil dagger. Su Tong was shocked. Zhou was still an enlightened master no matter what. At the foot of Yushan Mountain, the eldest princess beat him so fiercely, but it didn't hurt his vitality. This shows that Zhou's strength is definitely not blown away. But the dagger was silent and controlled Zhou's emotions so quickly. If he holds on to this for a little longer, I'm afraid it won't be long before this guy loses his mind and goes crazy. Fortunately, at this moment, a hand stretched out and gently took off the dagger from Zhou's hand. The dagger left his hand, and Zhou was stunned for a moment. When he looked back, he found that it was old Mrs. Meng. Old Mrs. Meng just glanced at her, causing Zhou to lose consciousness for a while, and then his eyes became clear. When he recalled what he had just said, he felt confused as to how he could have said such words just now. This sword is a good sword, but the aura is too strong and cannot be controlled by ordinary people. People who are not strong-willed will lose their mind. After saying this, Mrs. Meng said to Zhou with sincerity, "You children, you are just fooling around, neglecting your practice, your mind is unstable, and you cannot hold this sword." These words not only gave Zhou some advice, but also gave King Linghuo a chance to step down. It's a pity that although Zhou has regained his sanity from the influence of the dagger, apologizing in public is really embarrassing for him. Doesn't he admit to everyone that he can't do it? He curled his lips in dissatisfaction. When the Linghuo Ghost King saw this, he immediately felt a grudge against Zhou, but he still let out a dry laugh. There is no way that this is the step handed to him by Mengpo, and he has to go down if he doesn't want to. It turns out that this sword is responsible for evil. It is indeed a treasure left by the god of death. It is so magical. Mrs. Meng touched the sword's spine with her fingers, adding a seal to the sword, and then put it back on the plate. The attendant looked at the dagger, returned to the plate and relaxed, then hurriedly took the dagger and left. Everyone, let's continue. The origin of this coffin is quite big. Seeing this, the Spirit Fire Ghost King continued to auction the coffins as if nothing had happened. With the exhibition of daggers just now, everyone's enthusiasm suddenly increased this time. At the same time, outside the gate of the Chamber of Commerce, Gaozhou and Changwogu had already arrived. This place is really lively. If I say this is a ghost town, no one will believe it. Gaozhou looked around, watching the people coming and going, and couldn't help but sigh. He didn't expect that life after death would be so prosperous. Humph, even if you die without money, you will be a poor man. Chang Liuju was wearing a mask to cover the scars on his face. He was obviously beaten badly behind Yushan. If Gao Zhou hadn't arrived in time and took out 2 pieces of money, I'm afraid he would have been cut to pieces by 1,000 cuts at this moment. After this incident, Chang Liuju realized that death is not terrible, but having no money is a nightmare. Gao Zhou was also speechless when he heard Chang Wuji's complaints. I thought to myself that this unlucky child might have something wrong with him being hit in the head. Hey, wait. At this time, Chang Wuhan suddenly focused his eyes, grabbed Gao Zhou's arm, raised his hand and pointed forward, "Look who that is." Gao Zhou glanced at Chang Wu's hand and saw a familiar figure passing by in the crowd. But it was just a back view, but I didn't see it clearly. Who? Fool. You're a fool, Gao Zhou scolded angrily. You are the fool, I said, I saw a fool just now. Chang Liuzhu explained with a speechless expression. The corner of Gao Zhou's mouth twitched, and he finally understood what Chang Wuhan meant, and he immediately became energetic. The fool, the old man, and others got separated. His whereabouts are still unknown, and he doesn't know where this guy went. Unexpectedly, the fool also entered Dokeng. Come on, follow me. Being idle is also idle, it is better to find the fool first, which is also a good thing. The two squeezed through the crowd and followed the figure to the alley behind. Walking along the alley, they saw no sign of the fool. Just when they were confused, they suddenly heard the fool's silly laughter. The two looked at each other, walked a few steps forward in search of the sound, and saw an open door. It turns out that this is the backyard of the trade exhibition hall, where carriages and horses that come to participate in the trade show are parked. Seeing that no one was watching, the two of them walked in, followed the fool's laughter, and walked to the stable on one side, waiting for the two of them to take a closer look. But he saw the fool holding a big green cow and laughing like a ha ha ha. Hey, this idiot, we were worried that he got lost, but it turned out that he was having fun here. Chang Wugu shook his head helplessly. Gao Zhou is very open-minded, as long as the person is fine anyway. After saying that, he glanced sideways and saw that the fool was teasing the big green cow while taking out some very large beans from his pocket and stuffing them into the big green cow's mouth. The crunchy crunch that De Ching Niu eats looks more and more delicious the more he eats it, and he shakes his head from time to time. Only after Gao Zhou took a closer look did he recognize it. I'll go, Croton. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Infinite Script Killing. Author, Guo Shui Gan Xiao. Chapter 793. The auction on the third floor of the Chamber of Commerce is still going on. After what happened just now, instead of being frightened, these wealthy businessmen began to burst out with unprecedented enthusiasm because of the appearance of the dagger. It is said that when the god of death buries himself, he must carry many of his treasures with him so that he can be used by future generations after his resurrection. That dagger is the best illustration. As for the danger of opening the coffin, it doesn't matter. They can just ask the servants to do it instead. 2 coffins in succession fetched high prices. From the beginning to the end, Su Tong did not make a move, staring at the 2 coffins in front of him. With the help of the life Ikemen, although he could see the extraordinariness of the 2 coffins, he could see that the auras of the 2 coffins were not the same. Not intense. Therefore, he did not participate in the auction, but wanted to wait for the results to confirm his conjecture. Sure enough, when the 2 coffins were opened one after another, everyone was disappointed. The first coffin was opened and found to be empty. There was nothing in the coffin except a handful of dust. King Linghuo could only express deep regret for this result. After all, these coffins were buried under the underworld, and it was common for something to happen in the process. The situation of the second coffin was slightly better. The coffin was opened and there was a rotting corpse inside. The corpse's hand was holding a big knife tightly. This discovery made everyone excited, but when the slave took the big knife out of the coffin, the originally bright silver blade rusted at a speed visible to the naked eye, but in an instant it completely rotted and turned into a pile of waste. Copper and rotten iron. Now someone quit, spending dozens of money, and ended up with scrap metal like this. This is a scam. They are all liars. The wealthy businessman who bought the third coffin held up the rotten sword in his hand, pointed at the Spirit Fire King and screamed. No wonder he was so excited. Dozens of dark banknotes were not a small sum of money. Even if they were private banknotes, they were almost half of his net worth. I wanted to have a big gamble, but I didn't expect to lose so completely. These coffins are full of variables. If I knew what was inside in advance, how would it be your turn to buy them? If you can afford it, play with it. If you can't afford it, just get out. King Linghuo is not a good-tempered person, and this wealthy businessman does not have the background of Zhou Mu and others. I saw the big catfish's two pairs of small eyes flashing fiercely. It glared at the wealthy businessman fiercely, raised its hand and asked someone to throw the wealthy businessman out. No one will speak for this idiot. As the spiritual Fire King said, if it is really possible to know what is in the coffin in advance through other means, where will it be their turn to auction it here? Soon the third coffin was brought up. This coffin is exactly the stone-carved coffin that Su Tong noticed when he went upstairs. There was something strange about this coffin inside and out. There are strange textures carved around it. At first glance, the shape looks rigid, like a work of practice carved by a fledgling stonemason. But after looking at it for a long time, I felt that this coffin gave people a very strange feeling, as if the stiff lines and strange contours were deliberately done, making people feel more and more deeply as they looked at it. The feeling of being trapped in it. The three faces on the coffin board gave people a creepy illusion, as if the coffin was alive and still staring at them. In fact, this coffin has been here for a long time, and it was once put up for auction as a commodity, but no one can tell for sure. There are even rumors that Shen Tu once visited in person, but only took one look at the coffin, then turned around and left, saying that he couldn't understand it clearly. This shows how dangerous this coffin is. Su Tong tried to look at it with his life eye chi men, but he couldn't see anything. There seemed to be a mysterious power on the coffin that prevented him from peeking through it with his life eye chi men. Seeing that the life eye man was ineffective, Su Tong tried to use the magic eye again, but the result still didn't work. Still can't see anything. Neither Shen Mutong nor Minjian Kimen were able to observe the peculiarities of this coffin. This made Su Tong feel like he had no idea what to do. He thought to himself, is there some kind of forbidden formation? But then I thought about it and felt something was wrong. If it really existed, my life Ikemen would definitely be able to see the clues. At this time, Su Tong suddenly thought of the dagger in the first coffin. His heart moved and he tried to test it with Yan Shu. He closed his eyes, silently kneaded the secrets with his fingers, and used the spirit-seeking and bone-searching technique. A ray of spiritual light flickered on his fingertips, creating ripples in his mind as it headed towards the coffin. Kaka kaka. Suddenly, a strange and weird sound came from the coffin, and a strange pattern was woven into Su Tong's mind. It's really Yinshu. This discovery shocked Su Tong's heart. These strange graphics in his mind were cleverly spliced together to form a very ancient rune. This might be the key to the coffin. This discovery made Su Tong's eyes suddenly open, and he had already concluded in his heart that this coffin must be closely related to Yan Shu. The origin of this coffin is very mysterious. Two ferocious beasts under the underworld fought and smashed an island, which exposed the coffin. Otherwise, this coffin must have been hidden for a long time. King Linghuo couldn't help but sigh when he talked about the origin of this coffin. Huangquan is like boundless water. Although its name is a spring, its destination is a sea of Huangquan with no end in sight. There are countless ferocious beasts hidden below, some of which are so terrifying that even the emperor would have a headache. For example, the giant turtle called Xiantong beast has existed for who knows how long. It is so big that it can trigger a terrifying tsunami if it turns over. There is also a strange fish called the Huang whale, which roams the underworld and has almost no natural enemies. Unfortunately, these two guys seem to dislike each other, and they started fighting once they met. And this coffin was forcibly squeezed out of the underworld during the collision between the two. Otherwise, it would be difficult for anyone to find this coffin. Even so, it took an unknown amount of manpower and material resources to salvage the coffin. If the market had not been so bad this year, this coffin would not have been given away. The price starts from 10 ghost notes, and the price starts from 20 private notes. King Linghuo announced the low price, which was not unusually high, but as soon as he finished speaking, someone immediately made a bid. 20 real notes. Everyone was surprised and turned around to see that the bidder was the old woman whom Jomu and others called Grandma Meng. Now everyone was shocked. Some people wanted to bid for a chance, but knowing the identity of the old woman, they didn't dare to bid for a while. King Linghuo's long beard moved slightly, cursing his bad luck in his heart. I could only yell twice tentatively. 30. At this moment, someone suddenly broke the silence, which refreshed everyone's spirits. They followed the sound one after another, wanting to see who it was that didn't know whether to live or die. As a result, when I turned around, I saw Su Tong standing up and raising his hand, 30 real banknotes. Seeing Su Tong, King Linghuo was so excited that his long beard was waving wildly, thinking, this big dog finally takes action. Boy, are you looking for death? When Jomu and others saw someone daring to fight with Grandma Meng, they immediately showed their ferocity. It's a pity that Su Tong is not one of those businessmen, and he is not afraid of Jomu and others. He raised his head and looked at the Linghuo king. You can't take care of these vicious dogs with their teeth and claws. Hiss. As soon as these words came out, everyone gasped. Even the spiritual Fire King was stunned for a moment. Jomu and others were stunned for a few seconds, unable to believe their ears. Was he scolded by someone, or was he scolded as a vicious dog in public? This has not happened for many years. In the vast underworld, they have always scolded others, but no one dares to scold themselves. This is too incredible. Kill him. Jomu immediately called out his long sword and prepared to take action. Fortunately, at this time, the spiritual Fire King finally came to his senses. With a flick of his long beard, he actually fired a bright red light in front of Jomu and others, blocking Jomu and others back. Young gentlemen, please stop messing around. This is Dokeng, not Fendu. If you guys continue to make trouble, please leave. King Linghuo was already dissatisfied with them. If they were allowed to fight again at this time, the Chamber of Commerce would not be able to continue running today. Jomu and his brothers had never suffered such a loss before. Just when they were about to get angry, they heard a soft cough behind them. When I looked back, I saw it was Grandma Meng. Jomu's brothers seemed to be very afraid of this Grandma Meng, so when they saw this, they immediately did not dare to show off anymore, and obediently stepped aside, just staring at Su Tong with fierce eyes. I wish I could cut Su Tong into 8 pieces and cut his body into thousands of pieces. Su Tong didn't care about their looks. They had a grudge in the first place. How could he endure it for a while and be able to calm down the situation? Su Tong's attitude towards his enemies has always been that if he can step on both enemies, he will never step on just one. Old Mrs. Meng didn't say anything to Jomu and others, she just stretched out her hand, 40 genuine notes. This price is not low. 40 pieces of underworld money can definitely be regarded as a windfall for a wealthy party in the underworld. Many people signaled Su Tong to stop arguing. If he continued to argue, he would really offend people. Unfortunately, Su Tong ignored these kind looks and continued to bid, this time calling the price directly to the number of 60. It's not that he insists on seeking death. He knows that the other party may be Po Meng from the underworld, but he has a reason to fight. There seems to be traces of Yanchu in this coffin, and it is likely that there is an inheritance of Yanchu. This is very important to him. It's so important, how can you give it up to others? As for the identity of the other party, I have basically offended everyone in Hades this time. Do you still care about this one? Sure enough, even Mrs. Meng looked embarrassed at the number 60. Not everyone can get this money. Even Mrs. Meng couldn't afford so much cash at the moment, otherwise why would she be a bad person and raise the price first? Who is this person, who can produce so much money? Everyone began to question, Such a large sum of money was not a small number, and not everyone could easily come up with it. When Zhou and others saw this, they were about to get angry, but they were stopped by old Mrs. Meng. The old lady looked at Su Tong meaningfully. "Your Excellency has amazing financial resources, and I am ashamed of myself. But this coffin, I'm afraid, it cannot be opened by just a few slaves. This coffin is completely different from other coffins. It is seamless and has almost no gaps. It is obviously impossible to open it with brute force." When everyone heard this, they immediately understood what Mrs. Meng meant. The coffin could not be opened. If the coffin cannot be opened, can it be taken away? A businessman asked the Spirit Fire King. They had only focused on the treasures in the coffin before, and had not noticed the material of the coffin. It was integrated and it would not be easy to open it. "No, our Chamber of Commerce can collect it for you, and you can come and open the coffin at any time." King Linghuo said. He didn't say this in the beginning because he was worried about this situation happening, so in line with the principle of don't ask, don't tell, he didn't deliberately inform everyone. These coffins are contraband in the underworld and can only be opened in the formation. Once a god of death is found in them, they must be eliminated as soon as possible. How can anyone take them away? Zhou and others couldn't help but sneer when these words came out. Even Grandma Meng said that the coffin was difficult to open, so she didn't believe that the other party could open the coffin. If it can't be opened, the coffin will be left here until the end of the Chamber of Commerce. They have many ways to make this person vomit out with the coffin. "Don't worry, Your Excellency, our Chamber of Commerce has an excellent reputation and can guarantee that there will be no accidents with this item." King Linghuo was afraid that Su Tong would regret it, so he quickly added, "Need not." However, Su Tong waved his hand, took out a stack of ghost money and handed it to King Linghuo. "I will open this thing now." After that, he walked to the formation and prepared to open the coffin. Infinite Script Killing. Author, Guo Shui Gan Xiao. Chapter 794. Su Tong's move seemed to be beyond everyone's expectations. Whether it was King Spirit Fire, old Mrs. Meng, or even Lilith, they were all caught off guard. If a person with a discerning eye takes a closer look, it is not difficult to see that although this coffin does not look big, it is integrated into one piece, as if it were a stone sculpture, and there is no gap at all. Moreover, King Linghuo also said that this coffin was forcibly squeezed out from the fight between two underworld beasts. Although I don't know what kind of ferocious beast the Spirit Fire King talks about, you can see how hard this thing is when you see that there are not even a single chip on the coffin. Ha 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 ha, you still want to open the coffin? I don't look down on you, but a kid who has entered the Taoist realm dares to think so wildly. Zhou laughed loudly, but in the middle of his laughter, a mouthful of phlegm suddenly seemed to be stuck in his throat. His laughter stopped abruptly, and he stared at Su Tong with wide eyes, a bit of suspicion in his eyes. After all, that guy is also in the Dao realm. It's not that Zhou and others are slow, it's that they really didn't expect Su Tong to have such courage. Now the forces in the entire underworld are trying to catch him. How dare he come here to participate in such a blatant way in front of everyone? Trade show. Su Tong ignored Zhou laughter, just walked to the coffin, looked at the coffin in front of him, and frowned for a moment. Seeing this, the Linghuo king could only activate the formation, although he also felt that Su Tong's attempt to open the coffin was a little too fanciful. If it was really so easy to open, how could he be willing to take it out and sell it? But I think it's because I think the rules are dead. Anyone who wants to open the coffin must activate the formation, otherwise he won't be able to take responsibility for any mistakes. As the golden light rose, Lilith became nervous and regretted why she didn't drag Su Tong back. Under the gaze of everyone, Su Tong's hands were flat on the coffin, and only a slight flicker of fluorescence could be seen. Soul searching and bone searching is activated. Then he closed his eyes and gently stroked his fingers around the coffin, carefully feeling the invisible textures on the coffin. Others only regard these textures as decorative lines, but only Su Tong, who has studied Yan Shu, knows that these are the keys to open the coffin. Along with the exploration, the talisman in his mind gradually began to be complete, and many details that had not been captured through soul searching and bone searching were gradually completed. You are pretending to be a fool, can you open it or not? If you don't open it, get out. Xia Yan and others saw that Su Tong had not moved for a long time and couldn't help but urge him. I don't think he can open it. It's a waste of time. The other brothers were also sarcastic, which annoyed everyone around them, but no one dared to provoke these little devils. Time passed by minute. Everyone's patience began to wear away, and Zhou Mu's 4 brothers started to mock him one after another. Someone finally spoke up and suggested to King Linghuo to untie the formation and let Su Tong out. It was obvious that he couldn't hit the coffin. It's open. Who said I can't open it? At this time, Su Tong suddenly opened his eyelids and glanced sideways at everyone. I said, if you can't open it, don't waste your time, get out of here quickly, don't let me go in and beat you up. Xia Yan rolled up his sleeves and looked like he was about to take action. Su Tong raised the corners of his mouth when he heard this, stretched out a hand, and waved to Xia Yan, then come in and try. Act recklessly. Xia Yan couldn't stand such provocation. He even wanted to rush in and teach this guy a lesson. Zhou Mu's face suddenly changed when he heard this, no. But as soon as he finished speaking, it was already too late. Xia Yanren had already rushed into the formation. As soon as he entered the formation, Xia Yan didn't talk nonsense at all. He snorted angrily, and his figure suddenly rose up, like a blue dragon, and he flashed almost instantly. Came to Su Tong. At the same time, he waved his right palm covered with green light and hit Su Tong in the face. Facing this punch, Su Tong's eyes showed a cold look, and he did not dodge or dodge. He raised his hand with a bright light, and Vajra demon suppressing hand met the opponent's fist shadow and slapped it. From Chapter 7 of Volume 11. Xia Yan, who was originally confident, suddenly changed his face, and felt a powerful, arrogant, and terrifying force burst out. Peng. The shock wave visible to the naked eye vibrates around like water waves, hitting the surrounding formations, causing the golden light to ripple out in dense ripples. Ah! Xia Yan was thrown away by the shock, but Su Tong only paused for a moment, but then rushed towards Xia Yan, who was sent flying away. Such a familiar scene reappeared, but this time Su Tong was not worried about anyone protecting these brats anymore. Bang! The crisp sound was very loud, and in the eyes of the people around him, only a blurred palm shadow was seen, and it struck Xia Yan hard on the face like lightning. Xia Yan was hit by the slap like a top, and his whole body spun in the air. Then there was a sound of peng, and it hit the formation hard. This slap made Xia Yan's eyes flash with stars, and he couldn't even get up. He fell to the ground, seemingly unconscious. Call. Su Tong grabbed the clothes on Xia Yan's chest and lifted it up. The fist was like a hard hit on Xia Yan's lower abdomen, which immediately made Xia Yan's body arch involuntarily. A muffled scream came out of his mouth, and he fainted from the pain. Such a result is not unexpected. Although he has not become enlightened, his physical body is terrifying and inhumanly powerful. Although ghosts and gods like Xia Yan have the ability to become enlightened, they have no actual ability to achieve enlightenment. Compared with Su Tong's flesh and blood body, it was like a peeled egg, trying to hit a rock. This is the difference between the living and the dead. No matter how long you practice, without the protection of the physical body, your strength will still be inferior to the boss in the same realm. Okay. Seeing this scene, everyone secretly cheered in their hearts. They had long disliked these brats. Now that they saw Xia Yan being beaten, they felt so happy. If Jomyu and others were not there, they would have applauded in celebration. It's him! Jomyu screamed sharply. He was not sure at first, but now he recognized Su Tong's palm technique. At the 10-road pavilion, Su Tong used this palm technique to hit Xia Yan with one palm. Now that he was using the same technique again, how could Jomyu not recognize it? Su, I'm not done with you. The enemy was extremely jealous when they met, and Jomyu was determined to rush in and settle the score with Su Tong this time. But a hand pulled Jomyu back. He is a living person, and his physical body is comparable to that of enlightenment. You are no match for him when we come together. Mrs. Meng's eyes were scrutinizing Su Tong. Su Tong felt a chill all over his body, but he soon returned to normal. The gaze of Mrs. Meng obviously cannot be compared with those of the Supreme Emperors on Yushan Mountain. I can only see through some of Su Tong's strengths, but I can't see through Su Tong's base. You are indeed a heroic young man. No wonder so many people want to arrest you, but they have never been caught. You are the second person who has dared to disturb the underworld in so many years. The seniors have promoted me, how dare the juniors compare with the ancestor? Su Tong began to pull off the tiger skin. Regardless of whether this layer of tiger skin was useful or not, he should at least pull it on his body first. Oh, so you are a descendant of the Mei family. Everyone was shocked when they heard this, and even Jomyu and others frowned. The 4 words Plum Blossom Taoist once made the underworld restless for a long time. Now his descendants are making such a big noise. Isn't this Plum Blossom series incompatible with the natural horoscope of Hades and Earth? Su Tong did not admit it directly, but opened his palm, and saw a piece of white paper folded into paper flowers in an instant to prove his identity. When old Mrs. Meng saw this, she understood the meaning. A kind smile appeared on her face, but her words became colder. Back then, the Plum Blossom Taoist caused great trouble in the underworld and escaped unscathed. I wonder how lucky you, the Plum Blossom Taoist, are. As she spoke, old Mrs. Meng stood up from her chair. Su Tong was slightly frightened when he saw this, but he was not panicked. He took the initiative to reveal his identity, not simply to vent his anger. He took 2 steps back, but his fingers lightly touched the coffin beside him. The fluorescent light on his fingertips made the coffin behind him make a strange resonance sound. Coffin, the coffin has moved. Seeing this scene, everyone screamed. They didn't expect that the coffin could be touched so easily by Su Tong, and it seemed that there were signs of looseness. Old madam, I am about to open the coffin. If you want to come in and observe together, you should do so early. Su Tong said with a smile. At this time, Mrs. Meng's face stiffened and she stared at Su Tong's hand. She really didn't dare to go any further. Afraid that she would walk in, Su Tong opened the coffin the next moment. If the god of death was resurrected inside, she might not be able to survive the 5 thunder formations. Seeing that Mrs. Meng did not dare to enter the battle easily, Su Tong's mouth suddenly showed a sinister smile. He threw Xia Yan aside and summoned the second soul to protect him. At the same time, he walked to the coffin, stared at the coffin, and couldn't help but take a deep breath. He gently touched the surface of the coffin with his fingers, and saw dots of yin-yang gradually light up on Su Tong's fingertips. The appearance of this coffin is blessed by a layer of Yanchu, which needs to be unlocked by Yanchu. The strongest Yanchu in my hand is the Heavenly Thunder Curse, and just in case, I need a second soul to cooperate. But once the second soul appears, his identity will inevitably be exposed. That's why he deliberately provoked Xia Yan to come in. With this guy as a hostage, he was not afraid of them jumping over the wall in a hurry. Su Tong took a deep breath, waved his hands, and used all his strength to destroy the Yanshu, causing the coffin to tremble immediately. The 3 weird faces on the coffin board were actually emitting low screams at this moment, as if countless dead souls were whispering in Su Tong's ears. As the whispers became more and more harsh, the surrounding formations began to tremble violently, causing everyone to retreat. Even though they knew that the formation was unbreakable, they still felt involuntarily afraid. Soon the coffin seemed to be resurrected, and the texture on it began to become vivid and moving. The eyes of the three faces turned, staring directly at Su Tong's movements. As long as there was a mistake in one step, Su Tong would not do anything. Know what will happen. Su Tong's fingertips were like a dragon or a phoenix, and the light at his fingertips became brighter and brighter. With the touch of his fingers, wisps of dark blue spiritual light gradually appeared on the coffin, and a strange rune pattern appeared on it. Rumble. It was too late, but it was so fast, at the moment when this rune emerged from the coffin. The little fat man hugged his arms tightly, and suddenly a dazzling light of lightning burst out, hitting the coffin. Infinite Script Killing. Author, Guo Shui Gan Xiao. Chapter 795. Boom. Dazzling lightning struck the coffin, forming a dazzling glare that made everyone subconsciously close their eyes. Searching for souls and bones. Opening his fingers, he used thunder and lightning as a pen to draw the same talisman as on the coffin, and then Su Tong patted it down with both hands. The coffin in front of him made a harsh cracking sound. Three strange-looking faces were covered on the coffin, and a long, deep whisper came from their mouths. The sound was like a demonic voice, and it carried a strange power that made everyone feel chilled. However, when these sounds reached Su Tong's ears, they gradually became clearer. When the day disappears, the world will turn into polar night and return to chaos, and the gods will also fall. Weird whispers lingered in Su Tong's ears, like some kind of believer's prayer or some kind of doomsday prophecy. A large black substance appeared in front of Su Tong's eyes. These substances came from nowhere and swallowed up all living things in the world, whether it was the sky or the earth. Even the gods gradually decayed under the erosion of dark matter and turned into a puddle of mud. The picture flashed by, and when Su Tong's eyes woke up from the picture, he saw that the coffin in front of him was already covered with countless cracks. The three weird facial masks have been completely cracked, and even the eyeballs have turned into powder. At this time, the coffin in front of him had become quiet. Everyone stared with wide eyes. Su Tong did not rush to open the coffin, but put his face against the coffin. In the eyes of everyone's doubts, Su Tong tapped the coffin lid with his fingers. Is there anyone? No one. I'm going in. Everyone. Good guy, I've never seen someone open someone's coffin and say hello. This kid is crazy. Everyone murmured secretly in their hearts, thinking, if there was someone in the coffin, you might be buried with him today. It's just that Su Tong never paid attention to these strange looks. As the head of the seven sects, this is the basic procedure for treating the deceased with respect. After Su Tong waited for a while to make sure no one responded, he straightened his clothes and patted the coffin hard. Bang! Click, click, click. The cracks on the coffin immediately continued to expand, and with a roar, the coffin shattered. Suddenly, everyone held their breath involuntarily. King Ling Huo's hand tightly grasped the talisman that activates the 5-Do Golden Thunder formation. As long as there is a slight abnormality in the coffin, he will not hesitate at all. He will definitely kill Su Tong and Xia Yan as soon as possible. God is buried with him. However, after the coffin shattered, there was no god of death inside as people thought. Su Tong looked at the contents of the coffin with confusion. There was an egg inside. The egg, which is the size of a human head, is covered in golden dragon scales. It looks like a piece of art when held in your hand with a golden glow. Could it be the eggs laid by the god of death? Su Tong stretched out his hand, took the egg out of the coffin, and tried to throw it into the prop book. Living objects cannot be converted into prop cards. Looking at the prompts given in the prop book, Su Tong was speechless for a moment. Now everyone was confused. Since ancient times, when the coffin was opened, there were only two results. Either there was a living god of death inside, or it was a dead god of death. What the hell was this egg? King Linghuo held the talisman in his palm and began to feel entangled in his heart. He could only look at old Mrs. Meng. She seemed to be the only one with the longest experience here. Is this thing a god of death? After hearing King Linghuo's inquiry, Mrs. Meng was undecided. She had never heard of a case where an egg was hidden in the coffin. It is rumored that the god of death has a way of suspended animation. He transforms himself into an embryonic state and puts himself into a perfect dormant state. Once revived, he can return to his peak state in a short time. Mrs. Meng thought for a moment and spoke. Although she was just talking about a rumor, everyone could understand what she meant. What a god of death! This is just an egg. I think you, old woman, obviously have bad intentions. Lilith stared at old Mrs. Meng and bluntly revealed the key point. What rumors? She didn't believe there was such a weird method. This old woman must have seen Su Tong's identity exposed, so she was delaying time so that someone could catch him. Old Mrs. Meng glanced at Lilith, with a smile finally showing on her face. Then you still have time to leave now. Old Mrs. Meng has no interest in Lilith. She is not a prince or a ghost emperor, she is just an old woman who makes soup. As for Zhou and the others, they can't stop Lilith. Even if she loses her godhead, Lilith still has the strength to kill the Dao. If she really wants to leave, they can't stop her. Today, she wanted to keep Su Tong, not to give herself a bad breath, but also to give a bad breath to her grandchildren. Hey, who are you trying to scare? If I don't leave today, I will see who can touch him. Lilith squinted her eyes and glanced at Zhou and others. The joking eyes stared at Zhou and others with hair all over their bodies. After all, people who are in the Dao-slaying realm are called land gods, and they are not just blown away. When the Maihua Taoist was making trouble in the underworld, he was in the Dao-slaying realm. If this bitch really wants to go crazy, I'm afraid only Mrs. Meng can control her. Seeing this, Su Tong looked at the coffin again. After confirming that there was really nothing in the coffin, he re-examined the egg in his hand. This egg looks heavy in your hand, but its weight is not light at all. Just when everyone was at a loss, someone suddenly screamed, "What is he going to do?" When everyone took a look, they saw that Su Tong actually took out a hammer. After hearing what everyone said, Su Tong put the egg in his hand, shook it, and tapped it with his fingers. This thing it's delicious. Eat. Everyone was stunned, and then screamed, "You are crazy, you can't eat this thing." Everyone tried to dissuade him, putting aside whether the egg was the god of death or not. What if this thing is some kind of strange beast that survived from ancient times? That is a mythical beast. Once hatched, its value is limitless. Even if we take a step back, this egg may be the cub of the god of death, or it may hide a huge secret. Su Tong actually wants to eat? Su Tong raised his head when he heard this. It's okay if you don't eat. Then you can untie the formation and let me out. As soon as these words came out, everyone fell silent and could only look at the spiritual Fire King. Well, if you can trust me, you can keep this egg with me first. When Shen Tu comes back, you can let Shen Tu identify it. If it is not a dead god, it will be returned to its original owner. King Linghuo thought for a moment and came up with a compromise. Who knows that Su Tong still doesn't appreciate it, then I might as well eat it. As he spoke, Su Tong ignored the spiritual Fire King and a blazing fire rose from his palms. Seeing this scene, everyone's hearts were almost broken. This was probably the egg of some kind of mythical beast. Even Mrs. Meng's eyelids couldn't stop twitching when she saw Su Tong wasting things like this. This kid is much more decisive than the Plum Blossom Taoist back then. If Taoist Maihua could have been as decisive as the sun back then, things would not have gotten out of hand in the end. Seeing the fire getting stronger and stronger, what was unexpected was that as the egg burned with the flames, it actually emitted a strange fragrance. It was definitely not the smell of barbecue, but more like a unique fragrance. Ka-ka-ka. The scales on the egg gradually cracked under the fire, and the egg came to life. It swayed left and right in Su Tong's hand, as if something was about to break out of the shell. It's alive, it's alive. This egg is not afraid of fire, but uses fire to hatch. The scene was boiling, and many people were exclaiming. Even MRS Meng and several other elderly people opened their mouths in surprise, wanting to see what kind of creature was born inside. Su Tong couldn't calm down. He just wanted to eat it, but he didn't expect it to live. This was beyond his expectation. Watching this little guy struggling left and right in the eggshell, but never able to break out, Su Tong simply swung the hammerhead to help it a few times. The sledgehammer was swung in Su Tong's hand and hit the egg with 2 bang-bangs. Just hearing the sound of Su Tong's hammer falling, everyone's minds tightened, fearing that Su Tong's 2 hammers would smash the eggshell and kill all the creatures inside. I saw a layer of crystal dragon scales falling off the eggshell, and the cracks became bigger and bigger, but there seemed to be a membrane in the egg to prevent the little guy from getting out. Stay away. The spiritual Fire King roared and motioned for these people to stand back. If this thing was the god of death, he would immediately activate the 5-Do Golden Thunder formation to obliterate Su Tong and the others. The golden light in the eggshell became more and more intense, and many people could not open their eyes. They could only vaguely see a golden figure, like a golden snake or a golden dragon. Seeing that the little guy couldn't get out, Su Tong fired a sword energy and struck the eggshell. Click. The eggshell was torn open by Su Tong's sword energy, and golden light suddenly flashed, and the little guy rushed out. No one is not nervous, because the death god's ferocious power shocks the world, leaving too many legends behind, and every time he is born, he stirs up a bloody storm. Whoosh! Everyone only saw golden light shining, colliding with the surrounding formations from time to time. After a short pause, everyone was able to see the whole picture clearly. They saw this little guy, whose shape was very similar to that of a dragon, except that he had no dragon horns or dragon scales. His whole body was like a dragon. It's gold and jade, sparkling. Of course, there are differences. The eyes are too big and extremely watery. When the body trembles, 6 slender velvet horns protrude from the chubby head, and a pair of transparent wings sprout from the back. I saw the little guy opened his mouth and swallowed the eggshell in Su Tong's hand. He ate it all in one gulp. He turned around and opened his mouth towards Su Tong, looking like a child begging for food from his mother. The food looks exactly the same. So cute. Lilith's heart almost melted when she saw this. She had never seen such a cute little guy. Compared with it, those pets in hell were simply ugly. Seeing this, Su Tong took out a small piece of dragon rice from the props book and thought, this dragon rice is the ration of the dragon in the sky. This little guy should have no problem eating it. Su Tong brought the dragon rice to the little guy's mouth. After sniffing it for a few times, the little guy opened his pink mouth and swallowed the small piece of dragon rice in one gulp. After eating the dragon rice, the little guy's petite body grew a lot quickly. It turned into a golden light and penetrated into Su Tong's sleeves. It crawled around in Su Tong's arms and finally lay on Su Tong's shoulders. Make endearing noises. What exactly is this? Even though the spiritual Fire King was well informed, he was stunned and didn't recognize what kind of creature this was. But there is one thing. This little thing cannot be a god of death, because there is no aura of a god of death on his body. I saw the little guy crawling on Su Tong's shoulders, and then he opened his mouth, and there were dots of starlight in his mouth, and he spat out a colorful cloud. Seeing this, old MRS Meng's pupils tightened. Thinking of the origin of this thing, she stood up from the chair. It's Yun Xiang. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Infinite Script Killing. Author, Guo Shui Gan Xiao. Chapter 796. Mrs. Meng looked at the little guy in Su Tong's hand, her eyes full of surprise. Grandma Meng, do you know what this is? Zhou Mu looked at the little guy in Su Tong's hand with a greedy look in his eyes. This was a creature left behind by the god of death. It was probably some kind of divine beast. Everyone was listening attentively. Surprisingly, even Su Tong tilted his head and paid attention here, wanting to know the origin of this little guy from Mrs. Meng. Mrs. Meng watched it carefully, nodded, and said, "It's true, it's the Yunxolitl that has disappeared, but it's not a mythical beast." Not a mythical beast. After hearing this, everyone was inevitably a little disappointed, but Mrs. Meng changed her words, although it is not a divine beast, it is a kind of alien species of heaven and earth that can swallow the veins of heaven and earth and evolve all kinds of divine arts. It is said that there was an era when Yanju was rampant. The dream of every Yanju master is to obtain a cloud salamander. When everyone heard this, relief suddenly appeared on their faces, but they were inevitably a little disappointed in their hearts. No matter how precious this thing is, the word Yanju master has disappeared from everyone's mind for a long time. Only Su Tong felt a surge of ecstasy in his heart. Isn't this exactly what I need? When I think of Su Tong's eyes looking at this little guy, I immediately feel more cordial. The little guy looked around, then suddenly jumped up and disappeared without a trace. Disappeared. Everyone was startled and looked around, but saw no trace of the little guy, but only a few people observed the little guy. It turned out that this little guy actually got into Su Tong's mouth, which shocked Su Tong again. This thing called Tang Kao is hidden behind his head, and not everyone can see it. Unexpectedly, this little guy could not only find the entrance of the hall, but also enter and exit freely. As soon as I entered the hall, I saw this little guy jumping on the ferry stove, leaning up, looking like he was about to go to bed after eating and drinking. The image was so cute that even the big girl couldn't help it. I wanted to hug him, but I was afraid of disturbing the little guy's rest. Since there is no dead god in the coffin, please ask the king to unlock the formation. Seeing that the situation was clear, Lilith urged the Spirit Fire King to start the formation. No. Zhou Mu heard this and immediately stopped him. This man is a wanted criminal. We finally caught him and we can't let him go. Wanted criminal. Su Tong's brows moved slightly, then take out the wanted notice and I'll see who signed it. Zhou Mu sneered, White Emperor, Qing Emperor, Red Emperor and even Shen Tu's men are hunting you, and you are not a wanted criminal. Ahem, King Ling Huo coughed twice and had to interrupt Zhou Mu, I'm sorry, I haven't received any wanted documents from my lord. You. Zhou Mu didn't expect that King Ling Huo would demolish him at this time, and he was itching with hatred. King Ling Huo felt secretly happy in his heart, but he said with a fair attitude on his face, as for the wanted notice from Hades, I'm sorry, I didn't receive it either. After speaking, he looked specifically at Mrs. Meng, Mr. Meng, have you received a notice from Hades? Mrs. Meng frowned and shook her head no in the expectant eyes of her godson Zhou Mu and others. Although she wanted to teach Su Tong a lesson, Hades announced that she could not lie about such things. When Su Tong saw this, he immediately sarcastically said, I am the envoy of Yin Caosi and Yang Yin Si. How could I be wanted in the underworld? Mr. Zhou, you, the second-generation ancestor, seem to be less familiar with the rules than me, an outsider. No matter who you are, you can catch yourself if you want. Let alone catch yourself, no one will care if you chop yourself into meat paste. But if they were asked to come up with the notice, I'm afraid no one would be able to come up with it. This is the contradiction between power on the one hand and legal principles on the other. The underworld may not be fair, and no one would offend a ghost emperor, or even the big devil kings, for a small receptionist, an ant-like minion. But even if he were an ant, he wouldn't be able to tear off his face. King Linghuo released the formation, and Zhou Mu and others immediately rushed in and helped Xia Yan, who was already unconscious, up. At this time, an attendant hurriedly walked up to King Linghuo and whispered a few words in King Linghuo's ear. King Linghuo's expression suddenly changed. Noticing the expression of King Linghuo, Zhou Mu felt relieved, stood up proudly, and looked at Su Tong. "This time you can't fly." It turned out that after recognizing Su Tong, Zhou Mu quietly sent someone to send the message. At this moment, people from all sides were already swarming in. After hearing the news, everyone was panicked. They all got the news this year, so they didn't plan to come to this Chamber of Commerce. However, the Spirit Fire King repeatedly promised to protect their safety, so they came here reluctantly. I couldn't believe that I was going to get into such trouble. What they don't know about others is that the subordinates of the 5 emperors and great demon kings are all cannibals who eat people without spitting out their bones and run rampant. Even if this is Peach City, there is nothing they dare not do. The spiritual Fire King's long beard trembled, and he was suddenly very angry. He thought, did he not read the almanac this year? After thinking for a moment, he said to Su Tong, "You two have important matters, please leave now. King Linghuo is issuing an order to expel guests." When Zhou Mu and his brothers heard this, they immediately became unhappy. The 5th brother immediately called out his sword. "You can't go there today. Young gentleman, this is Dokeng." King Linghuo reminded him again, and at the same time looked at Po Meng, hoping that she would open her mouth to control these 5 brats. It's a pity that Mrs. Meng turned a deaf ear to this time. There was absolutely no intention of restraining Zhou Mu and others. Not only was there no restraint, but he also looked like he wanted to support them. This made King Linghuo completely annoyed and directly called out Mrs. Meng's title. "Mr. Meng, do you really want to ignore her?" After hearing what King Linghuo said, Su Tong was sure that the person in front of him was really the rumored Po Meng. "Whatever." Po Meng put down the teacup in her hand and said in a rude tone, "I came all the way here, and someone disgraced me and beat my god-grandson. How could I ignore it? You, a catfish, want to save face, so why don't I lose face?" Po Meng looked at Su Tong and Lilith coldly. "None of you can leave today." As she spoke, Po Meng suddenly appeared in front of Su Tong. "I beat my godson and want to leave. How can there be such a good thing in the world?" As he spoke, he raised his hand and slapped Su Tong. Su Tong instinctively wanted to dodge, but found that his body was unable to move. He could only watch as Po Meng's palm fell. Boom! However, this slap did not fall on Su Tong's face, and was blocked by Lilith with one hand. "Take your dirty hands away, it's not your turn to touch my people." Even if she lost her godhead, Lilith still had the strength to kill Deo. Even if she was not her opponent, she had no intention of giving in when facing Po Meng. Unexpectedly, when Po Meng saw this, she suddenly grinned. She opened her mouth and blew out a stream of white smoke, which shone on Su Tong and Lilith. Call. The white smoke dispersed, and some wealthy businessmen were unable to dodge. After being contaminated by the white smoke, they immediately fell to the ground unconscious. The rest of the people fled in panic, for fear of being contaminated by the terrible white smoke. This smoke is called Daemon 3, and it is a strange smoke made by Mangpo using Mangpo soup. Once caught in the illusion of the third life, even if Lilith has the power of the Earth Fairy at the moment, her whole body will be soft after being hit by the stick, and she will not be able to escape from the trap for a while. As for Su Tong, I am afraid that he will not be able to escape from the third life in a year or two. Wake up from a dream. Lilith was caught off guard and was immediately shrouded in white smoke. Her eyes were filled with double images, and her body fell back weakly. Ha 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 ha, a little baby is worthy of fighting with me. A smile appeared on Po Meng's face. If she really wanted to take action, she would have to use some means to capture Lilith. After all, being in the Tao-killing realm and known as the Earth Immortal was no joke. Now I have a little plan to capture the two of them, and the next thing will be much simpler. Immediately, Po Meng turned around and looked at King Linghuo. For Shentu's sake, I won't care about what happened today, but I have to take these two people away. If anyone dares to stop me, don't blame me. Before Meng Po finished speaking, her expression suddenly changed. She suddenly turned around and saw a figure rushing towards her in the white mist. Impossible. Po Meng was shocked. In her third life, even the Ghost Emperor would faint for a while. How could anyone escape? In horror, Po Meng raised her hand and slapped her, and saw a burst of green light, which hit Po Meng's palm. For a moment, the green light actually bloomed with frost, and countless sharp ice spears burst out from the light shield. It's just that this method is not worth mentioning in the eyes of Mrs. Meng, so she slaps her down. Click. There was a sound of shattering glass, and all the green light and ice spears shattered into ice shards. But the figure rushed forward at this moment. Seek death. Without even looking at it, Po Meng raised her skinny palm lightly and grasped the figure in her hand. But as soon as the figure took hold, Po Meng suddenly realized that something was wrong. Turning around, he saw that it was a paper man. The paper man's body was covered with strange curse marks. After being grabbed by Po Meng, he heard a cold snort coming from the white mist, explode. Boom. In an instant, the entire pavilion shook violently, as if it was about to collapse. The guests inside were so frightened that they ran out, but it was too fast. I saw a thunderball as thick as a bucket exploding on the third floor of the building. The terrifying silver shockwave carried traces of thunder and lightning, like thousands of silver snakes wandering around, making everyone on the street feel numb. The dazzling tears turned the whole world into a dazzling day, and the lightning went straight through the floor, directly to the first floor. Some unlucky souls were instantly wiped out in the lightning, and many ghosts let out shrill screams and suffered painfully under the lightning. It turns out that Su Tong used hundreds of heavenly thunder talismans to make a paper man last night. Every heavenly thunder talisman on this paper man had been upgraded by Su Tong using the fantasy Rubik's Cube. Each one has been strengthened to the level of Add 3. Each one costs about 15 script points. The cost of this paper man is almost close to 2,000 script points. One can imagine how terrifying the power of such a huge thunder is. Only when the thunder light dissipated did they see Po Meng standing there with a look of disgrace, with several more cuts on her palms. What was even more shocking was that the pavilion in front of them was split into two halves by lightning. Such terrifying lightning made everyone tremble. At this moment, the figures of Su Tong and Lilith had disappeared without a trace. Po Meng glanced at her injured palm, but her heart was filled with shock. What shocked her was not the horror of the thunder and lightning. Although the lightning was strong, it did not cause any serious harm to Po Meng. At best, it would just leave a few more cuts on her hands. But what really surprised her was why Su Tong was immune to the poison of his own Big Dream 3. Thinking of this, Meng Po had only one answer in her mind: unless this person had no previous life, and if the poison of 3 lives was naturally ineffective against him, how could this be possible? Who, except those ancient gods, could not have had a past life? Grandma Meng. Zhou Mu and others woke up at this moment and rushed over to check on Po Meng's injury. But she saw Mrs. Meng's face darken, and she threw their hands away, her eyes overflowing with red light. If you want to run away, there is no door. As he spoke, he took out a bell from his sleeve. The bell swung and made a crisp ringing sound. Moo. I saw a big green bull soaring into the sky and leaping in front of Po Meng. Po Meng got on the green bull and patted the green bull's head. Chase it? Moo. The green bull shook its head and kicked hard with its hind legs. Immediately, everyone's eyes widened as they watched the big green bull jump up, spraying an indescribable substance from behind its buttocks, and then fell downstairs, stunned. I couldn't get up. Joe Mew and others were stunned for a few seconds before they realized that they were covered in cow dung. Their faces turned green for a moment, and they lay on the ground and vomited. Infinite Script Killing. Author, Guo Shui Gan Xiao. Chapter 797. In the alleys of Dokang, Su Tong just ran forward with Lilith on his back. He couldn't care less about what was happening behind him. Gaozhou, where are you people? While running, he asked in the team channel. We encountered a little trouble, but it was solved quickly. What's the situation over there? Big trouble, I may never drink mengpo soup in my life. Su Tong felt a little sorry for this. At the same time, he called Gao Zhou and the others to solve the problem as soon as possible and join him. Now that he has been exposed, the pursuers will arrive in an instant. The only way out for him now is to forcefully break through Dozai Mountain and send Lilith out of the underworld. As he spoke, Su Tong had already jumped onto the high wall and looked ahead with his supernatural eyes. He saw the city gate behind Dokang from a distance. Through the gate, there was Dozai Mountain. This distance is not short, not to mention that the Taoji Mountain behind is shrouded in a grey aura, making it completely invisible to my own eyes. Just as Su Tong was thinking about various feasible plans in his heart, suddenly, a strong sense of crisis appeared in his heart, but soon this sense of crisis disappeared. This disappearance was very sudden, as fast as the ebb of the sea, but the next second, every hair on Su Tong's body stood up. Turning his head suddenly, he saw a huge bow aimed at him about 100 meters away. The backbone of this bow actually seems to be made of a kind of pitch-black metal. The pale bowstring is made of the fascia of some unknown beast, and it is almost as thick as the diameter of a human thumb. The bow is full moon, the arrow has been strung, and the bowstring has been tightened. A dark hand holds the huge bow, the muscles of the fingers are protruding, and the veins under the skin are bulging. There was a collapse sound, which was the sound of the bowstring being released. The sound was even like a sharp arrow, penetrating his internal organs first. Suddenly, Su Tong's face turned pale, and his internal organs seemed to have been severely injured. His throat felt sweet, and a stream of blood overflowed from the corner of his mouth. But at this moment, it was too late to adjust his breath. The black arrow in front of him had already arrived in front of him in an instant. Xianyuan shield. A ray of blue light instantly rose in front of Su Tong, and a bright light burst out from the arrow. After colliding with the Xianyuan shield, it instantly penetrated the Xianyuan shield. The momentary barrier only bought Su Tong a few milliseconds. The moment he tapped his toes, he could only move an inch in a hurry. He watched helplessly as the arrow pierced through his lower abdomen, carrying long blood flowers, and pierced straight through the dead tree behind him. Master! Su Tong was shocked, and now he could see the enemy attacking him very clearly. It was a ghost general riding on a war horse. He had a tall and burly figure, and his whole body was wrapped in jet black leather armor. He had long gray hair, and wore a ghost-like mask on his face. His face could not be seen clearly, but he could see those eyes full of cold fierceness and murderous intent. Su Tong glanced at the war horse under the opponent's crotch. It was completely different from the mounts of other ghost generals who were chasing him. The whole body of the war horse was burning with corrosive black flames, and wisps of sparks were sprayed from its mouth from time to time. Instead of wearing a battle armor, he wore a large flag with only one word devil on it. Are they the subordinates of the 5 emperors and the great demon king? Su Tong frowned. He had never seen such a team before, and saw the other party raising the long bow again. Su Tong took out the big rhinoceros bow without hesitation. Without taking out the magic arrow, he opened the bow and pulled the string directly. The dragon scales on his arms opened, and wisps of fire quickly gathered on the bowstring. The opponent's archery skills are extremely high. If he turns around and runs for his life at this time, he will only become a target. The best defense is offense. Even if they fired their bows at the same time and omitted the action of knocking the arrow, they were still faster than him. Wind archery active skill, 3 consecutive rounds, activate. Consumes 300 script points. After activation, shoots 3 arrows at once. Bang. 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 3 crimson arrows tore through the sky, formed a glyph, and struck straight up. The other party didn't seem to expect Su Tong's reaction to be so quick. Not only was he quick, but he also counterattacked so sharply. He could only put away his bow and arrows at an extremely fast speed, and when he pulled the reins, the horse jumped up and dodged Su Tong's arrows. In this case, the horse can be swung into the arm, and the opponent's equestrian skills can be seen to be superb. Seeing that the hit missed, Su Tong immediately put away his big rhinoceros bow, took out a Minjai wound-reducing pill and ate it. From Volume 12, Chapter 31. This elixir can not only restore 30% of internal injuries, but also increase one's movement speed by 40%. At the same time, the leopard soul cloak is waved, and the skill leopard attack is activated together with the active skill of void boots on his feet, Lingbo Wuhen. The former increases one's own movement speed in a straight line by 80%, while the latter increases one's overall movement speed by 200%. Coupled with the 40% movement speed brought by Minjai Injury Elixir, his movement speed exploded to an incredible level in a short period of time. After the opponent dodged the arrow, they saw that Su Tong had already rushed out 1,000 meters away. It was probably too late to open the bow and shoot again. However, Su Tong's arrow just now also revealed his position. A large number of cavalry roared on the street, and some ghosts who could not dodge were trampled directly to their death. They don't care where this place is or how much trouble they cause, they will naturally have to be shouldered by their superiors. If they can't complete the task, they won't be able to turn over in their lifetime. No matter how fast Su Tong was, he could not outpace the pursuit of these cavalrymen. A ghost will charge on horseback at an extremely fast speed, waving the spear in his hand, emitting a dark aura, and with one shot, he will be like a black dragon, opening its mouth to devour the world and kill Su Tong. Seeing this, Su Tong's eyes revealed a ferocious aura, and he summoned the Pure Yang sword. The moment he held the long sword in his hand, the hot power of Pure Yang covered Su Tong's body, and the dragon scales on his body were instantly transformed into Pure Yang. White, in a moment, it was completely transformed into a Pure Yang body. All things day and night, after activation, you can use the introduction to temporarily transform your own power. The sword moves in all directions. The sword edge was swung, and the blazing Pure Yang fire roared with the sword edge, slashing at the attacking black dragon. Boom! The blazing sword blade split the dragon's head and collided with the ghost general's spear. After making a clear buzzing sound, under the ghost general's incredible eyes, he cut off the spear in his hand and struck it directly on the ghost general's chest. The unstoppable Pure Yang sword energy directly slashed it away. This scene shocked many people. Su Tong was not only a deist, but he was a Dao-level ghost general who was seriously injured with one sword. But who can know how terrifying the Pure Yang sword in Su Tong's hand is? Once the world is enlightened, there will be no swordsman in the world. With the addition of the Pure Yang body, this little-known divine sword can truly explode with terrifying power. Watch out for that sword. Realizing the Pure Yang energy on the sword blade, the ghost generals immediately did not dare to engage in close combat with Su Tong. The Pure Yang sword itself was already unstoppable, not to mention the Pure Yang energy, which was a natural nemesis for these ghosts. They did not dare to fight Su Tong directly, so they quickly distanced themselves and led the cavalry to outflank Su Tong, preparing to trap Su Tong and slowly wear down the guy's strength. Su Tong rushed forward, and they followed suit, always keeping a distance and firing cold arrows to harass them from time to time. Seeing more and more of these cavalry, Su Tong could not help but feel a little angry in his heart. He glanced at the city gate not far away, and when he was thinking about how to break out, Gao Zhou's voice suddenly came from the team channel. "Head, this way." Su Tong looked up and saw Gao Zhou standing on the city wall. Then several black shadows shook on the city wall, and a huge crossbow arrow was slowly pushed out. It turned out that after the fool fed the big green cow with croton, he led the two of them straight to the city gate. With the strength of Gao Zhou and Chang Wuju, it is naturally impossible to control the city defense quietly. But what the two of them didn't expect was that the fool and the guard guarding the city didn't know what they were talking about, and the guard took everyone down the tower directly. I don't know what kind of benefits the fool promised, but the guard general looked amused and very happy. The two asked the fool what was going on, but the fool just smiled and said nothing. For a moment, the two of them didn't know what to say. Kaka kaka. As the zombies turned the crossbow's churning plate, only the harsh sound of stringing was heard. "Fire the arrow." Gao Zhou waved his hand, and the zombies behind him all pulled the mechanisms on the crossbows. Bang! 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 With a deafening tearing sound, several crossbow arrows fell through the air and hit the cavalry group heavily. In an instant, a large area of cavalry was penetrated directly. The terrifying power blasted a hole several meters deep in the ground. Countless gravel and bricks flew out like cannonballs, causing the formation of these cavalrymen to be thrown into chaos. "Daya!" Seeing this, Su Tong called Daya out and threw Lilith to her. "Let's go quickly." After saying that, he jumped up and rushed in front of the ghost general in front. He raised his long sword and the pure yang fire left a white frost in the air. Fire slash! The fierce sword energy merged with the pure yang fire, and the sword struck down like thunder. Yin Shen kill. The ghost general raised his sword to block, summoning the evil wind that could tear the void. However, facing the pure yang fire slashed by the pure yang sword, all the evil wind and evil spirits disappeared. Boom! The huge shockwave knocked all the yin soldiers away, and Su Tong suddenly opened a gap in the original encirclement. Daya took the opportunity to rush out of the siege with Lilith in her arms, and her figure turned into a white fox and shuttled through the gaps between the yin soldiers. However, as she continued to run forward, the tightly closed city gate blocked the way. "Just run." Su Tong stood behind Daya with his sword and shouted to Daya without looking back. Hearing Su Tong's shout, Daya didn't hesitate in her eyes anymore. She just rushed forward with Lilith in her arms. As her figure got closer and closer to the door, she saw the door trembling slightly. Buzz! A pair of arms slowly lifted the door to a gap. As the gap opened, Chang's free figure was revealed. Every inch of the muscles on this guy's body tightened, his legs stepped on the ground, and the muscles on his arms bulged. Zhang's face turned red from holding back. Originally there was a stirring plate behind the door that could lift the door, but when Chang Wuhan went to turn the winch, he discovered that the winch was damaged. Seeing that the winch was useless, the guy actually used his own body to hold the door open. Just when Daya jumped past with Lilith in her arms, Chang Wuhan blushed and screamed at Su Tong, "Hurry up, I can't hold on anymore." Su Tong kept retreating after hearing the words, but at this moment, his ears moved, and the sound of rapid horse hooves rushed out very clearly in the chaos. I saw the big flag hanging on the black war horse fluttering, and the magic word shaking, giving people a strange feeling, as if as the war horse charged, the surrounding time slowed down, or even solidified. Some ghost generals saw this with a strange look in their eyes. "Being Iron Demon Riders, why are they here?" In everyone's surprised eyes, the war horse leaped forward and appeared in front of Su Tong the next moment. The spear in his hand seemed to freeze the surrounding time and stabbed Su Tong's chest directly. Su Tong could only watch the spear getting closer and closer, but he was unable to resist it, and his limbs seemed to be frozen. Amitabha. Soon after, a sudden sound of Buddhist chanting came, breaking the shackles of time, and a big knife struck the spear. Boom! The sharp collision sound made everyone frown unconsciously. Su Tong suddenly raised his head and saw the fool appearing next to him, with joy in his eyes. Unexpectedly, the fool was here. I saw a golden lotus hanging above the fool's head. There was a Buddha sitting in the lotus with an auspicious expression and kind eyes. The bright light was an immortal god. Ksitagarbha Bodhisattva. All the ghosts looked at the Buddha's light blooming in the golden lotus and couldn't help being shocked. Whether it was the ghost generals who were chasing Su Tong and others or the ghosts around them, they all knelt down and worshipped. Hey hey! Under the lotus, the fool turned around and grinned at Su Tong. I sent you here. As he spoke, he raised his hand and grabbed Su Tong's collar and pushed hard. It pushed Su Tong towards the door. Seeing this, Chang Liuja caught Su Tong's collar and rolled back, and the huge city gate fell heavily with a roar. Infinite Script Killing. Author, Guo Shui Gan Xiao. Chapter 798. Boom. The door was slammed shut. Su Tong looked at the closed door with a wry smile on his face. This fool. Different scenes, the same parting. I thought it would be different this time, but unexpectedly I was saved by a fool. But what was different from before was that this time he was not worried that the fool would be in danger. The golden lotus was the fool's support. With Ksitagarbha golden lotus here, who can touch a fool? Getting up from the ground, Su Tong looked back and glanced at Chang Liuju. The guy fell to the ground and didn't want to move. The door weighed 1,000 pounds. He forced it up, and many parts of his body were broken. Su Tong gave him a Mingya injury pill to eat and pulled him up from the ground. You can hold on. Chang pouted his lips casually, but he said, I can live a long and healthy life even after you die. Ha 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 ha, it's really cool. Gao Zhou walked down from the city wall and just fired an arrow. Countless cavalrymen were knocked down by his arrow. He hadn't felt so good in a long time. How on earth did you do it? Su Tong pointed to the city wall, meaning how on earth they could occupy this place. You must know that although this is not a wasteland city, it is not a small place like Wencheng. This city defense must be guarded by someone. With Gao Zhou and Chang Liuju alone, Su Tong doesn't think they can do it. They are all fools. When we met him, he was still feeding Croton to the big green cow behind the Chamber of Commerce, and then he brought us here. Just when Gao Zhou wanted to elaborate, Lilith coughed several times and faintly woke up. When Su Tong saw that Lilith was awake, he didn't ask too many questions. He checked Lilith's condition and found that it was nothing serious. Why are you okay? Lilith woke up and looked at Su Tong with a confused expression. It was said that even Lilith would be hit by the poisonous mist that Meng Po breathed out, but Su Tong didn't have any trouble at all, which is unavoidable and surprising. In fact, Su Tong was also very surprised about this issue. Seeing the poisonous mist spit out by Po Mang, I couldn't help but feel a little bit in my heart, but then I found that I was just in a trance for a while, and then I was fine. He didn't have time to think about it carefully at the time. Now that Lilith mentioned it, he couldn't help but feel weird in his heart. But since it had no impact, why did he think about him so much? They have more important things to do right now. The door behind him could not be blocked for long. Su Tong was still frightened when he recalled the attack by the black armored cavalry just now. Not only is the opponent's bow skills formidable, he can even freeze time once he takes action. He has the fighting power to match an enlightened person, but he has no power to fight back against such a master. What's more, there is that MRS Meng who may catch up at any time. If they delay here for a second, the danger will increase. Therefore, Su Tong could only take Lilith and the others to continue walking towards Dozai Mountain. As long as he sent Lilith out of the gate of hell, his mission would be completed. At the same time, On the other side, Zhou Mu and others were seen riding on the Xingguo-class leopard colt, looking at the big green ox on the side from time to time. I saw the big green bull taking a few steps and then stopping for a moment. As he walked along, the ground was already miserable. Fortunately, there is no real environmental protection and here, otherwise I might have to send greetings to Mrs. Meng's family. Grandma Meng, can we catch up with that kid if we go like this? I just heard that the city gates in the back mountain are closed, and they won't be able to open for a while. Zhou Mu couldn't help but ask when he saw old god Meng Po sitting comfortably on the big green ox. They were now taking another route, a route they had never heard of before, and it felt more like they were going in a circle. This inevitably made Zhou Mu worry that by the time they arrived, Su Tong would have already escaped from the underworld with others. It doesn't matter, the gate of death in Dozai Mountain is not something anyone can break through if they want to. Po Meng had a smile on her face. Since ancient times, there have been many emperors, heroes, and even the proud men of heaven who are cultivating, but some of them do not want to break out of the underworld and return to the Yang. But how many are really successful? Although this kid is a guide and will not be troubled by the evil spirits in the Hell Gate, it is not an easy task to get to the Hell Gate alive. They slowly caught up, and naturally they could keep up. Only, there was a strange look in Po Meng's eyes, and she was not actually interested in the female envoy. Several ghost emperors competed for the female envoy. To put it bluntly, they were trying to get an excuse so that they could have a chance to go on an expedition. As a woman who makes soup, she has no soldiers, and her strength is far inferior to that of several great emperors. What's the use of fighting for a female envoy? What really made her decide to take action against Su Tong was because there was a big problem with this kid. The poison of his third life is the most peculiar poison in the world. Although it will not hurt people's lives, even a ghost emperor will be dizzy for a while after taking a whiff. But the boy named Su had no influence at all. This inevitably made Po Meng wonder if there was any big secret hidden in this boy. After all, there is no original soul in this world, and this kid has no previous life. This is a bit shocking. Zhou Mu and others didn't know what Meng Po was thinking. They just wanted to catch Su Tong immediately and let the boy understand what would happen if he offended them, the devil in the world. On the other side, Su Tong and others walked along the path towards Dozai Mountain. As the saying goes, it's like running to death by looking at the mountain. Dozai Mountain looks very close to Dokeng, but when you actually walk up the mountain, you find that it gets further and further away. If I had known better, I would have captured the mounts of those little beasts. Chang Wuzi inevitably felt a little regretful. The idiot pulled them away too hastily and failed to capture the sparkling leopard colts, otherwise they wouldn't be walking on foot now. Don't be stupid. That kind of mount has probably already recognized its owner. If you dare to catch it, I'll give you a kick. Su Tong rolled his eyes at Chang Wenzhen. I thought to myself, even fools are smarter than you. If he doesn't catch him, how can he let you catch him? After saying that, he asked Gu Zibai in the team channel, Ziobai, how are you doing there? It's okay, it's just that Dokeng is in chaos right now, and the old Taoist took us in. Gu Zibai said and sent a visual screenshot. A large number of cavalry could be seen frantically smashing down the door, and not far away, many Dokeng guards were already fighting with these cavalry. This is not surprising. No matter how you say it, Dokeng is also an important city under Shentu's rule. Lord Shentu's annual expenses come from here. These cavalrymen rushed into Dokeng today, not to mention how much damage they caused. If there is no explanation for this matter, it will not only ruin Shentu's face, but also cause Dokeng's reputation to plummet, and it will damage Shentu's pocket. That is to say, right now, the big guys like Shentu were left in Yushan by the emperor. Otherwise, on normal days, even with 100 courages from these guys, they would not dare to make such a fuss in Dokeng. Now they had to kill Su Tong, capture the female servant, and earn back the face of their master. I am afraid that when the matter is over, they will have to behead their heads to vent their anger to Shentu. Did you see a ghost general wearing black armor and white hair? He was alone, and his mount was covered with a big flag. Su Tong asked Gu Zibai. He was not afraid of other ghost generals. He relied on the pure yang sword in his hand to kill each one by himself. But only the black-armored ghost general brought too strong a sense of crisis to him. It gave Su Tong the feeling that this guy was too strong, as if he was not even a match for the eldest princess. Gu Zibai looked around, then shook his head. No, I didn't see it. After receiving Gu Zibai's answer, Su Tong couldn't help but feel uneasy. The other party put too much pressure on him, and he always felt that if he didn't keep an eye on him, he would inevitably murmur in his heart. Is it possible that this guy has climbed over the city wall? This idea came up and was quickly rejected by Su Tong. There are prohibitions in the underworld. Unless there is a ghost emperor, not everyone can be treated like this. Of course, nothing is absolute. In short, Gu Zibai failed to see this guy, and Su Tong was inevitably a little uneasy. Hey, listen, there is the sound of water. At this time, Gao Zhou pricked up his ears and listened carefully to the sound of river waves ahead. When everyone walked over and took a look, they saw that the road ahead was swallowed up by a huge black water. If I had known, I would have brought the eldest princess here. How can we survive in such a large lake? Gao Zhou looked at the black water in front of him and couldn't help but complain. There is a stone monument ahead. Lilith looked around and saw a huge stone tablet standing on the edge of the pool. The stone tablet was 9 feet high and was carried on the back of a stone turtle. It's hard for everyone not to notice. However, the stone tablet was already covered with a thick layer of dust. Gao Zhou walked up and wiped it a few times before everyone could see the writing on it clearly. The road ahead is through the gates of hell. The living cannot approach it, and the dead cannot approach it. There are countless evil spirits along the way. They cannot be trusted, heard, or spoken. I advise you to turn back and never move forward. Looking at the writing on the stone tablet, everyone could only shake their heads. It was another long nonsense. If they could turn around, would they still use this ghost place? Su Tong walked to the black water and tentatively dropped a paper boat. As a result, the paper boat sank when it encountered water and disappeared in the blink of an eye. It can be seen that this black water lake is similar to the black water summoned by the eldest princess. While Su Tong and others were struggling, a burst of singing suddenly came from the water. Just listen to the singing. Although the music is simple, the singing is heroic. Everyone looked intently and saw a farmer paddling a small boat. There's a boat. Seeing this, Gao Zhou looked overjoyed and hurriedly waved and shouted to signal the boatman. When the boatman saw this, he swiped the oar on his hand and walked towards Su Tong and others. The boatman was dressed simply, with white hair and bare feet. He was holding an oar in his hand. After seeing Su Tong and others, his face showed a smile. With a bright smile, "What are you doing? Boatman, can you take us to the ferry?" "Don't worry, we are willing to pay the money," Gao Zhou said quickly. However, when the boatman heard this, he waved his hand and said, "My ferry only ferries the ghosts of the dead, not the living. Moreover, the road ahead is full of dangers. If you go forward, your lives will be in danger. Boatman, I'm here to escort the messenger. I just want to send someone to the gate of hell. Can you be accommodating?" Su Tong stepped forward and handed a piece of money to the boatman. The boatman glanced at Ming Chao and said with a silly smile on his face, "Someone told me the same thing last time, but in the end this person was divided up by many evil ghosts. Do you still want to go? Go, otherwise we will die more miserably later." Gao Zhou couldn't care so much and jumped directly onto the boat. Seeing this, the boatman could only shake his head helplessly and motioned to Su Tong and the others to get on the boat. Chang Wuhan stepped onto the boat, glanced sideways at the boatman, and suddenly asked, "Boatman, Did that person die tragically last time? The boatman nodded. It's really miserable. He was torn open and eaten by a few evil spirits. Oh, it's really miserable. Those evil ghosts left his head at the end and let him watch him being eaten. Finally, he dug it up. If you kill his head, you don't know how terrifying that scene is. The boatman also made signs as he spoke, fearing that he might not be able to explain clearly. Since he died so miserably, how can you, boatman, be safe? Chang Wahen asked the boatman with narrowed eyes. This. The boatman was startled. After being stunned for a second, he hurriedly said, I can run fast. As soon as the boatman finished speaking, he heard Su Tong sneer coming from behind, my sword is faster. Puff. In an instant, the sword light slashed through the boatman's throat. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Infinite Script Killing. Author, Guo Shui Gan Xiao. Chapter 799. Before the boatman's head fell from his neck, Chang Wenzhen caught him in his hand. Hey! I saw Chang Wahen lifting the head in front of him, with a beast-like smile on his lips. This time you try another one. You, repay kindness with hatred. The boatman was not a living person. He was still alive after his head was beheaded by Su Tong. He stared at Chang Wenzhen in front of him in horror. The smile on Chang Wahen's face grew stronger. He put the boatman's head close to his face and whispered in his ear. Yes, I like to repay kindness with vengeance the most. I not only like to repay kindness with vengeance, but I also especially like to eat fresh food. Although you are a bit old, you are still okay. Later, I will throw you into the oil pan and eat it. He, you see I have all the sugar and garlic ready. Head. Gao Zhou looked at Chang Wuji's morbid expression and couldn't help but look at Su Tong in confusion. But I heard Su Tong say in the team channel, it can't be trusted, it can't be heard, it can't be spoken. Isn't it written clearly on the stone tablet? Of course, just based on the words on the stone tablet, I might not attack the boatman. After all, I am not that kind of perverted murderer. But when he stuffed a piece of money into the boatman's arms, the boatman looked like he didn't care at all, which made Su Tong start to feel alert in his heart. He believes that there are good people in this world, but good people and greed are not in conflict. A kind-hearted person will be ecstatic when he sees 1 million cash delivered to him. What? Donated? Oh, that's not called kindness, that's called a saint. It's just that there is a very small probability that saints will be in the minority after all. Compared with the saint, Su Tong is more willing to believe in another sentence, being good for no reason is not for wealth, but for life. He told Gao Zhou not to worry and just let Chang Wahen be the bad guy. Sure enough, under the stimulation of Chang Wahen's almost perverted words, the boatman's face became more and more frightened. When he saw Chang Wahen starting to take off his clothes, the boatman finally couldn't bear it anymore and became angry in fear. I saw that the originally friendly and kind expression became distorted in an instant, revealing a face with dark red eyes, fangs exposed at the mouth, and a pig nose turned out. No matter how you look at it, it doesn't look like a good person. When people are in great fear, they often become extremely angry, and obviously evil spirits are no exception to this. You little bastards, my king will cut you into pieces later, take out your intestines and eat them all. All kinds of unpleasant insults were shouted out under the ferocious face of the boatman. But when he saw that Chang Wahen had taken out a neat set of tableware and a picnic stove from the prop book, the scolding gradually turned into pleading, please, I don't want to be completely destroyed. As long as you are willing to let me go, I am willing to work hard for you. Chang Wuzi silently raised the delicate knife and looked at the thin body of the boatman in front of him with critical eyes. The cold blade touched the boatman's skin and he asked calmly, so, You took us across the river to send us to see your king. Watching the blade gradually move downstream, the boatman couldn't resist the tremendous psychological pressure and told everything he knew in one breath. It turns out that their king is hiding in the middle of the water. After the boatman sends the boat over, their king will surface, open his bloody mouth, turn into a cave, and then wait for them to take the bait. As long as they enter the cave, it is their king's territory, and no matter how powerful they are, they will never survive. This old thief disguises himself really well. Fortunately, I still regard him as a good person. Gao Zhou on the side felt cold sweat in his heart. They were unfamiliar with the place, and the boatman looked worried about them. He said that he had to gain their trust without knowing it, and he would die without knowing how. If you know the reason, it will be easier to solve. Su Tong looked at the headless corpse in front of him and immediately had an idea in his mind. Wow! Apart from the boatman, there was only one man sitting on the bow of the black water boat. The boatman swung his oars and passed through a fog, when a huge cave suddenly appeared in front of him. We're here, all you have to do is walk inside. The boatman pointed forward in a hoarse voice and said. The figure sitting on the bow nodded numbly, jumped off the boat, and walked forward step by step. The tunnel smelled sour. As I was walking, my feet suddenly felt weak and one foot sank into the soil. Looking down, he saw a rotten little hand greedily hugging his thigh under the soft soil. You've been fooled, and there's delicious food delivered to your door again. Distorted faces emerged from the surrounding soil, letting out sharp laughter. A group of evil spirits rushed forward and began to tear the man's clothes, and their sharp claws began to tear the man's body apart like sharp knives. From the beginning to the end, the man's expression was very calm, without even a hint of symbolic struggle. An evil ghost moved his face up curiously, looking up and down at the man's face. Seeing the layers of thick paper charms wrapped around the man's face, there was a bit of confusion in his eyes. Just when the evil ghost stretched out his fingers to tear these paper charms apart, suddenly a dazzling electric light flashed from the man's empty eyeballs. Boom! There was a sudden loud explosion in the cave, followed by a dazzling light of lightning overflowing from the entrance of the cave. Ouch! Painful wails came from the entrance of the cave. Suddenly, the entrance of the cave in front of him began to tremble. The seemingly solid boulders cracked open, revealing black and sticky skin. A huge eyeball opened above the entrance of the cave, staring at it. Boatman. Unexpectedly, the boatman took off the hat on his head, revealing an unfamiliar face. He suddenly jumped up from the boat, and saw the pure yang sword in his hand burning with hot fire. Pyrophilia. Pure yang fire and fierce swordsmanship combine the magic flames of demonic power with the fusion of hell fire. The fire light forms a strange blood light. As Su Tong slashes with his sword, the entire lake is reflected in a vermilion sea of fire. Boom! The unexpected fireball exploded in front of the giant eye, and at the same time, the pure yang sword cut under the skin and flesh of the giant monster in front of him, as smooth as cutting tofu, from head to tail. Leng Shengsheng cut a huge wound on the monster's face. Roar! Suffering heavy injuries one after another, the monster twisted its body in pain, and tentacles protruded from the water one after another. The flesh on the huge tentacles twisted, revealing faces. For a moment, dense eyes opened, and their vicious gazes locked on Su Tong. Kill you! For a moment, the huge tentacles flapped towards Su Tong, but Su Tong was seen stepping on the black water with both feet, not affected by the black water at all, and his figure flickered and kept retreating. Boom boom boom! Tentacles hit the water one after another, splashing huge waves and crashing down towards Su Tong. I'm waiting for you to come out. Seeing that most of the monster's body emerged from the black water, Su Tong opened his hands and waved his palms. The Xianyuan shield appeared in front of him, and a huge cold current suddenly broke out above the blue shield light. Countless ice spears erupted on the water, and some tentacles were pierced by the ice on the spot. While causing the monster to feel pain, his eyes were suddenly covered by dazzling arcs of electricity. In an instant, ice and thunder alternated, causing the monster's whole body to twitch uncontrollably. "Ha ha ha, let me come." At this time, a burst of wild laughter was heard, and Chang Wenzhen's figure appeared quietly on top of the monster's head. A bone blade appeared in the palm of his hand and slashed forward. The next moment, the figure appeared on top of the monster. In front of the eyeball. The bone blade pierced the monster's eyeball on the spot, and black blood leaked out like a dam opening. This series of blows made the monster, who was called the King of Black Water by the boatman, feel extremely depressed at this moment. Before he even had the meal in his mouth, he was pushed to the ground and hammered by these thugs. When he saw the figures of Lilith and Gao Zhou walking on the ice, the Black Water King finally became afraid and immediately gave up his tentacles that were frozen on the water to escape forcefully. "We are all here, why are you running away?" Lilith's figure arrived in an instant, and a dazzling inverse pentagonal light appeared, a crimson ray that almost split the Blackwater King in half. At this time, the Blackwater King was completely afraid. It was not good at confronting these people head-on. Instead, if it deceived these guys into its belly and relied on the endless evil spirits in its belly, even the evil spirit would be filled with hatred. Here it is. But because of the boatman's incompetence, Su Tong saw the flaw early. Seeing that Lilith was about to kill her, King Blackwater hurriedly said, "Don't kill me. I am willing to give you a treasure and send you to the other side. Kill you and we can find the treasure slowly. As for the other side, we can go to the other side by ourselves." Lilith opened her palms, and layers of complex magic arrays appeared in her palms. "No, no, no, I have a big secret that I can tell you." Looking at the complex magic circle in Lilith's palm, King Blackwater's skin and flesh trembled, and countless faces of men and women screamed in fear. Hearing this, Su Tong walked to Lilith and asked, "What secret? Is it possible to exchange a life?" King Blackwater asked. However, when she saw Lilith's displeased brows, she hurriedly said, "If you go further, you will reach the ghost-faced forest, the territory of thousand-faced old monster. Although you are powerful, you may not be the opponent of thousand-faced old monster. Let me tell you the true identity of the thousand-faced old monster." When death was imminent, in order to save his life, King Blackwater did not care about the life of his best friend, and opened his mouth to reveal the weakness of the thousand-faced old monster. This thousand-faced old monster is a 10,000-year-old tree demon that sucked the filthy air in front of the ghost gate and turned into a forest. Every tree is his clone. Unless it is the yin god of Dozai Mountain, once an outsider walks in, not only will they not be able to get out, but they will be sucked away by the surrounding blood trees at all times. The more movements there are, the more power is sucked away. The only way is to destroy his true body. King Blackwater stretched out a tentacle and took out a dark jar from his mouth. It looks like a pickle jar, but there is a strange fragrance inside. Su Tong was worried that there was a scam, so he just summoned a paper man to pick him up. The old monster with 1,000 faces has a weakness. He is blind, deaf, unable to hear or see, but he has a strong sense of smell. As long as you smear this thing on your body, he will not be able to detect you. Hearing what King Blackwater said, Su Tongke took the jar and tried to throw it into the prop book. Resentful water mud. A very strange substance that can block all olfactory detection after being applied to the body. Duration, 3 hours. Cooling time, 7 hours. After looking at the entry in the props book that proved that this item was harmless, Su Tong finally believed the words of King Blackwater. But this didn't really reassure him. "It's okay not to kill you, but just in case, I have to wrong you for a while first." While Su Tong was speaking, he took out the demonic bell. With the bell in his hand, he shook it lightly and stretched out his hand to launch the soul-arresting technique on the Black Water King. But the moment he took action, Su Tong's pace was interrupted by the sound of galloping horse hooves behind him. Boom! Followed by a rapid sound of breaking wind, Su Tong instinctively hugged Lilith sideways and escaped. Then a stream of light was seen, penetrating through the ice, flying past Su Tong and Lilith, and just in time to shoot an arrow directly through the head of the Black Water King. Suddenly, King Blackwater's body trembled violently, and the human faces on his flesh began to shrink rapidly. In the blink of an eye, it turned into black powder and began to dissipate on the netherworld. Su Tong suddenly turned around and saw the black-armored warrior on a horse in the distance, holding the longbow and staring at him with cold eyes. This guy is still haunted. Su Tong's face turned cold when he saw this. He turned back to look at Lilith and whispered, "Can you beat me?" Lilith looked at the black-armored warrior and shook her head solemnly, "No, this guy is blessed by a great god. We are really no match. If you have the blessing of Godhead, it will be easy to deal with this guy Lilith. But I'm afraid he is not this guy's opponent at this moment. If you can't fight, just run." Su Tong sighed helplessly and said to Gao Zhou and Chang Liuzhu, "The wind is blowing hard." As he spoke, Su Tong raised his hand and struck the black water in front of him with his sword. For a moment, the black water stirred up huge waves. Then, as the Xianyuan shield was activated, a biting cold air burst out, freezing the waves and turning them into a layer of ice. The wall blocks their presence. Then they took Lilith and stepped on a huge piece of broken ice. Gao Zhou and Chang Liuzhu knew the idea was very difficult and did not dare to show any desire to fight, so they immediately followed. "Sit tight!" Su Tong shouted, then called out the cold iron gourd with one hand, opened the gourd plug and pointed it behind him. The wind spit blade was activated, and an ice storm spurted out from the lake. With this violent wind, it quickly pushed the solid ice under its feet and glided on the water. Not to mention the speed is quite fast, comparable to a small yacht. Maybe when Xie Qifanba gave this gourd to Su Tong, he didn't expect that one day, this thing would be able to be used like this. Whoosh! 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 Arrows continued to shoot through the ice wall behind him. Fortunately, there was an ice wall blocking them. These arrows had almost no accuracy and could only create huge whirlpools on the water. Hiss! Seeing how terrifying the power of the arrow was, Gao Zhou couldn't help but take a breath and looked back. The ice wall behind him had been shattered by the arrow, and the black-armored warrior was riding a horse. The war horse under its crotch completely ignored the influence of the black water. If you look carefully, you can see that the hooves of the war horse have not landed on the water at all, but are hanging in the air. Didn't it say that only the Ghost Emperor can fly? Seeing this, Su Tong couldn't help but feel a little in his heart. The other party's behavior of clearly ignoring the prohibition was definitely not a good thing. I was afraid that if he handed Lilith over at this moment, the other party might not be able to let them survive. Who is this guy? Fortunately, although the opponent's mount was not affected by the black water, its speed in the air was much slower than on the ground. In addition, Su Tong and others relied on the thrust of the cold iron gourd to move faster and faster, and they gradually managed to shake off. It's the woods. Soon, a large bright red forest appeared in front of them. The trees in this forest are of unknown age. Each branch is as thick as an adult's waist, and the trunk is so round that it would take 4 or 5 grown men to round it. There are leaves on the tree that look like maple leaves, but each leaf is extremely huge, so there is no problem in hiding a person. There is no grass growing in the wild land of the underworld for thousands of miles, but there is such a large forest here, which is really rare. However, they had already learned from King Blackwater about the dangers of this forest. It is inevitable to be on guard in my heart. Maybe it's an opportunity. Chang stared at the woods ahead carelessly, thinking about what King Blackwater had just said, and thought, If this woods really has that kind of terrifying power, maybe they can take advantage of it. Then he said to Su Tong, "Take out the jar of mud and let everyone put it on." Su Tong was startled, then nodded, and took out the resentful water ointment that King Blackwater had just given. Everyone ignored the smell and applied it directly on their bodies carefully. At this time, Gao Zhou looked back at Su Tong and found that Su Tong seemed a little absent-minded. He couldn't help but ask, "Are you okay?" "Fine." Su Tong shook his head, but he couldn't help but think of Zhu Ronzi's words, "I saw your death date, just recently, the blood was sprinkled all over the red leaves, and your body will fall to the ground. Under a bloody tree, you have no way to survive." This low roar echoed in Su Tong's ears. Just when he was hesitating in his heart, a hand tightly clenched Su Tong's palm. When he looked up, he saw Lilith's blazing red eyes staring at him. Lilith pointed her finger at Su Tong's heart, "I believe you." Su Tong's pupils tightened, and he took a deep breath, his eyes gradually becoming sharper, "Then I will never let you lose." As he said that, Su Tong stretched out his hand, and saw 4 golden pills appearing in his palm. They were the trump card calendula that he had prepared for a long time. "I have a stomachache today. I've had a bad meal, I've had vomiting and diarrhea, and I'm missing 1,000 words for everyone. I'll make up for it when I recover." Infinite Script Killing. Author, Guo Shui Gan Xiao. Chapter 800. Da-da-da. The flaming horse's hooves trampled on the soil. At this moment, the war horse suddenly stopped. The sharp eyes under the mask could not help but reveal a bit of surprise. But soon the surprise gradually turned into contempt and disdain. I saw Su Tong leaning against a big tree next to the woods in front of him, holding a hookah pipe in his hand, as if he was deliberately waiting for him. The flickering firelight in the smoke pot reflected on Su Tong's face. This time he really had the opportunity to examine the black-armored warrior in front of him. With a puff of smoke coming out, Su Tong raised his head and said, "Give me a chance. I'm just a little minion. If I hand people over, I'm derelict in my duty. If I don't hand them over, I'm disrespectful. No matter which way I go, I'm going to die. But the ants are still alive. I just want to live, sir, please give me a chance." Hearing Su Tong's words, the black-armored warrior's eyes became even more playful. After all, Su Tong's words already meant begging for mercy and admitting defeat. Buzz. The black-armored warrior pulled out the dagger from his waist and swung it at the ground. The sword energy took off and a cold wind blew past, leaving 2 big characters on the ground. "No." "Yes," Su Tong nodded as if accepting his fate, put away the hookah pipe in his hand, summoned the pure yang sword and held it in his hand, "Then don't blame me for fighting to the death, sir, be careful, let's move decide the outcome." Su Tong's eyes suddenly became sharp, and he slowly raised the pure yang sword in his hand, and saw wisps of scorching pure yang fire rising from the sword's edge. When the black-armored warrior saw this, there was a strange look in his eyes. The contempt in his eyes gradually disappeared, replaced by admiration for the brave man. He did not take out the long bow, but put the dagger in his hand on his chest. This is a tribute to a warrior and a brave man, but it represents a fight to the death between both sides. Hiss. Sensing the fighting spirit of its master, the war horse let out a low neigh and immediately began to accelerate towards Su Tong. Da-da-da-da. Under the charge of the war horse, the distance of 100 meters was shortened by more than half in an instant. The black-armored warrior raised the dagger in his hand, and the blade shone brightly, exuding a terrible breath of death. The war horses galloped, and their hooves trampled heavily on the ground, rolling up the floating sand on the ground, revealing apricot yellow talisman papers under the sand. Suddenly, there was a golden light on the ground. A strange talisman appeared under the horse's hoof. The black-armored warrior was startled, but the hoofs of the war horse swung uncontrollably from side to side, and both the man and the horse rolled directly to the ground. Kill you while you are sick. Before the black-armored warrior could get up, Su Tong raised his hand and struck down with his sword. Pure Yang sword light shot through the air, but it was not striking at the black-armored warrior, but at the warhorse beside him. Boom! Sooner or later, the black-armored warrior waved his hand and threw his dagger, blocking it in front of the horse. The dagger immediately made a crisp buzzing sound, and was struck by Su Tong's sword and flew away. Whoosh! I saw the dagger drawing a parabola in mid-air. Before it landed, a hole opened in the void. A palm came out and grabbed the dagger. Then, with a low and evil laugh, it was quickly withdrawn. The palm disappeared without a trace. Run! Seeing that the blow missed, Su Tong put away the Chunyang sword, turned around and ran away. Ah! When the black-armored warrior came back to his senses, he discovered that the ground was actually covered with a layer of talisman paper. Suddenly, the negative emotions of being deceived, angry, crazy, and violent rushed straight to his forehead. The black-armored warrior's eyes suddenly turned red. It was as if all the blood in his body was rushing to his head. Su Tong's behavior not only deceived himself, but also insulted the respect he gave to his warriors. He let out a low strange cry from his mouth and rushed to the forest. Looking around, he saw the deep forest in front of him, and a thin layer of mist filled the forest. When he glanced around, he did not see Su Tong. Trace. Ah! When the black-armored warrior saw this, he let out a harsh and strange scream. Although he couldn't understand it, he was sure that it was extremely pregnant. Hiss. At this time, the black-armored warrior suddenly heard a sharp sound of horses hooting behind him, and suddenly turned around, his heartstrings tightening. I saw a figure lying next to the war horse, holding his hands tightly around the horse's neck. This person is Gao Zhou. It turns out that the fall talisman covered on the sand is just a cover. The real killing move is Gao Zhou buried underneath. I saw Gao Zhou opening his mouth, spitting out his sharp fangs, and viciously biting through the horse's throat. One fang is sucking the power of the war horse, and the other fang is injecting corpse poison into the body of the war horse. Seeing this scene, the black-armored warrior immediately turned around and rushed forward. As a result, Gao Zhou immediately let go of his horse, grabbed the longbow on the horse's back with one hand, and at the same time ate the earth escape pill that Su Tong gave him. Menzi plunged into the road and disappeared the next moment. These earth escape pills are two superpower pills that were refined using the souls of the Mago cult members in the previous script world. One is the fire preventing pill and the other is the earth escape pill. Su Tong has always left it in the prop book. Inside. From Volume 10, Chapter 74. Just in case, Su Tong also specially upgraded this elixir with the Fantasy Rubik's Cube, reaching a level of Ad 3. After Gao Zhou took this pill, he was able to use the earth escape technique to escape 1,000 meters away in the blink of an eye. When the black-armored warriors rushed over, looking at their bitten horses and stolen bows and arrows, they were so angry that they went crazy. It's a pity that he can't speak, otherwise the yelling and cursing would have been endless. Knowing that yelling and scolding was useless, the black-armored warrior could only take out the elixir from his arms, crush it with his fingers and apply it to the wound on the war horse, then ride on the war horse and chase into the woods. At this moment, whether it was Su Tong or the other two thieves, he wanted to tear them into pieces. The war horse was very fast, but when it really rushed into the forest, it gradually became apparent that something was wrong. Looking back, I found that I could no longer find the route I came from. Sensing something was wrong with Lin Zi, the black-armored warrior showed some hesitation in his eyes. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. Suddenly, in the white mist, a cold arrow of pure yang energy struck. The arrows transformed by pure yang qi are as fast as lightning and arrive almost instantly. The black-armored warrior's pupils tightened, a cold light flashed in his eyes, and he let out a cold snort from under the mask. He took out a metal short stick from his waist, twisted his fingers, and the two ends of the short stick rose up, revealing the sharp spear edge, and then pointed hard towards stab forward. Immediately, an overwhelming force gathered on the tip of the spear, and when it was stabbed, the air around it was emptied, forming a huge wall of wind. Bang! 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 The arrow exploded instantly under the collision with the wind wall. The black-armored warrior's eyes flashed, and he turned the spear in his hand. For a moment, a huge amount of force was concentrated on the spear. As the black-armored warrior raised his arm, the wall of wind squeezed in front of him turned into hundreds of feet. The long wind blade moved towards the front. Boom boom. The ancient trees in the sky were cut into pieces on the spot under the wind blade. Su Tong was originally hiding under an ancient tree. When he saw this, he could only give up the idea of continuing to shoot the opponent. He jumped up from behind the ancient tree and hurriedly avoided this terrifying wind blade. This move instantly revealed Su Tong's position. When he saw Su Tong's figure, the scarlet eyes of the black-armored warrior were already filled with murderous intent. He kicked his horse, and his figure suddenly turned into a gust of wind and charged towards Su Tong. A deadly blow without mercy. The spear is like a giant dragon, causing time around it to freeze. It's this move again. Su Tong stepped back and looked with his third eye. This time he could see many subtle details. When the opponent charged, there seemed to be an invisible aura that distorted the surrounding space, even achieving the effect of getting rid of time. But it seems that only the opponent can achieve such a strange state when charging. Seeing through the mystery of the opponent's frozen time, Su Tong's heart moved, and he raised his hand and pointed at the horse, "Climb down for me." A golden light flashed from the fingertips, which was the wrestling spell. This is an innate talisman. Raising your hand to form a talisman can even ignore the restrictions of Yushan Emperor's palace, let alone the opponent's war horse. Sure enough, the horse slipped and its front legs stepped on its hind legs. Seeing that it was about to repeat the same mistake, the black-armored warrior quickly pulled the reins, jumped off the horse and kicked hard, using his strength to help the horse stand up again. This exaggerated horsemanship was simply miraculous, but after that, the time blockade that had just been formed completely disappeared. Su Tong curled his lips and said, "Hey, it seems that I have a magical skill that can defeat the world's cavalry." After saying that, without waiting for the black-armored warrior to mount his horse again, he turned around and ran into the woods behind him. What head-to-head confrontation! Only a fool would confront this guy head-on. Su Tong ran as fast as he could, and the trees around him became increasingly dense wherever he passed. The black-armored warrior followed behind him. Although the terrain was complicated, the war horse under his crotch was incredibly nimble, always biting Su Tong's tail tightly. Looking at Su Tong's back, the black-armored warrior felt so aggrieved that he was about to collapse. He had never seen such a shameless person. He wanted to charge, but he was afraid of Su Tong's innate talisman. He wanted to shoot the thief with his bow, but his bow and arrows were stolen. The Su Tong in front of him made him gnash his teeth with hatred, but he was still trying to pull a rabbit away from a tortoise. Gritting his teeth, he could only use the spear in his hand to slash the wind blade behind Su Tong, but Su Tong was like a cunning mouse. He flashed left and right, tossed and turned, and although he looked embarrassed, he was still unscathed, as if there was a strange force secretly helping him. Every time he wielded the large-scale wind blade without hesitation, Su Tong either happened to fall into a hole, or the terrain in front of him suddenly became shorter, causing him to escape without any risk. Gradually, as time passed, the frequency of the wind blade began to become less and less. Even the speed of the war horse began to slow down. How long can you last? Su Tong dodged the attack of the wind blade and looked back at the black-armored warrior with squinting eyes. His eyes were flashing with fluorescent light. With the help of the life Ikemen, he could see wisps of things that even the divine eye could not see. Red threads were wrapping around the body of the black-armored warrior crazily.
While frantically plundering this guy's power, it also invisibly seeped into his luck, eroding it crazily. Seeing this, Su Tong gradually began to slow down his pace, turned around and made a grimace with bared teeth at the black-armored warrior, and then silently raised his middle finger.